IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Wednesday, October 2nd. Trevor, and I'm kind of enjoying this Wednesday because, Notre Dame needed a break mentally and physically. And you know what? I needed a little bit of a break as well.
Yeah.
It hasn't been much of a break. I needed a break from prepping for another opponent and just allow me to focus just on Notre Dame. First of the month is always busy and crazy, insanely busy for me as a business owner because people need to get paid, which means I need to figure out how much people need to get paid and all this other kind of stuff. It is crazy. So I've been to bed about 4 o'clock in the morning the last couple of days, but I am here. I am ready to roll, and I'm ready to talk some Notre Dame football, man. So I apologize to everyone. We are getting a little bit later start than normal. I've been on the phone the last hour with a lot of people. There's a lot of stuff going on in the recruiting world. Can't really talk about it. Won't be dropping it on the board. But one thing we do expect to happen here soon. Another thing may happen soon. It's crazy. It's crazy, Trevor. But I'm ready to talk about some different type of recruiting. So today we're going to have two shows. We're going to do number one. We are going to break down the commitment of Antavious Richardson, who goes by the nickname Scrap, which I kind of like. There's a lot of nicknames that kids have that I am not a big fan of. And it's just like, yeah, but Scrap, that's like, okay, that's the kind of kid you want. I don't know what it means, but in my head, I've convinced myself I know what it means and I like it. He committed to Notre Dame yesterday during the show, actually. So we're going to break down his commitment in the way that we always do. And then once we're done with that, we are then going to have our buy, sell, hold. I promised you guys last week that this week's buy, sell, hold would not be a 5-hour show, but you guys had a lot of great submissions. I'm pretty confident it won't be a 5-hour show, but Trevor, we still have a lot of great submissions that we get to. So I'm excited about it, man. And this is going to be your first recruiting breakdown. Second buy, sell, hold, but first recruiting breakdown, man. So I'm ready to roll.
I'm excited, man. It's going to be a good day. Second buy, sell, hold. It was a 5-hour long show last time, but I had a really good time. It's an awesome break during my week because right now I'm in the middle of moving, and I'm sure anybody in the chat, and Brian, I knew you understand that moving is just a hassle. No matter where you're moving to, no matter what you're doing, I'm a little sore, but it's okay. I'm excited to talk some ball today, man. I'm ready to get after it.
Today, we're going to be talking about, I had a feeling I might have muted myself. So that's why I was like, okay, I'd gone away from the screen. I was like, let me go ahead and get back over there because I think I put myself on mute. Today, we're going to have some fun talking about this, Trevor. I'm excited about this recruitment, and we're going to dive into it because this is sort of the, when you missed out on the recruits that you wanted at receiver. They made some choices about guys they didn't go after that I didn't love. Then they went after some guys that I wasn't very high on. Fortunately, in my opinion, they missed on a couple of those guys. Sometimes it's, you miss on a guy and you look back, you're like, yeah, that worked out pretty well because you ended up getting this kid over here. And, you talk about a lot of frustration with receiver recruiting. And I said, well, look, I had a problem with their plan. I think their plan wasn't good. I think there were some players that they should have gone after that they didn't go after, and all that, Cooper Perry and Dalen McCutcheon and guys like that they flat out should have gone after, but they made those choices. So then the question is, okay, well, receiver recruiting is screwed. Well, okay, let's wait to see who they get first. And that's kind of where Notre Dame is they're in the, okay, this didn't go the way we wanted it, but how are we going to finish? How are we going to recover? I remember not too long ago, Notre Dame wanted a running back named Will Shipley, who I think was a very good college running back. And Will Shipley is a good football player. And I think Will Shipley would have been even more effective in college running behind the Notre Dame offensive line than he did behind the Clemson offensive line. And that was a big loss. They put all their eggs in that basket. Yeah. Well, they're screwed at running back. Okay, well, let's see how they recover. And they went out and got Audric Estime and Logan Diggs. That's pretty good recovery, because as much as I liked Will Shipley, Notre Dame would have been just fine at Notre Dame, and we wouldn't have thought about it. He was a really good football player. Well, Audric Estime turned out, in my opinion, to be even better than Will Shipley was, at least from a production standpoint. Now, we could argue would Audric have done as much at Clemson, but it's irrelevant. He chose Clemson, Audric chose Notre Dame, and Audric was really flipping good at Notre Dame. And so it worked out. And we've seen situations like that before, Trevor, where they've missed on a guy, and you don't spin it like, oh, it's good that they missed on that. No, I wanted Will Shipley. I liked Will Shipley. I was bummed when they got him. But the question is always, okay, what do you do next? And now Notre Dame has kind of taken their next step in what do you do next? And it's been interesting, Trevor, because you have two commitments from Jerome Bettis and Elijah Burris. And then they basically dropped Sean Terry. And so you're down at 2 and you're like, okay, what are you going to do? Well, what Notre Dame did is they went out and identified 3 to 4 early players. 2 of them they've really zeroed in on. Actually, 3 of them, it was actually 5. 3 of them they decided to really zero in on. It was Jalen Cooper, Isaiah Mizell, and of course, Scrap Richardson, who is now committed to Notre Dame. And so he was one of the players that was picked up on by Notre Dame when they had their miss on Derek Meadows and some of those other guys. They said, okay, we're going to turn our attention here. And I got to tell you, Trevor, I fell in love with the kid right away. I know that there were some people at Notre Dame that were incredibly high on him. There's 2 receivers, I won't say which ones, that the people I talked to are super high on, and he was one of them. And there's a lot of people that believe he's a hidden gem. There was a little bit of nervousness. Notre Dame kind of thought they were going to get Antavious for a while, and then Bama got involved. And so that's kind of the backstory there. This kid was initially committed to Georgia State. Then he flipped to South Florida because he got bigger offers at that level. And then, of course, in the last couple months, Notre Dame's offered, Bama's offered, Louisville's offered, Duke has offered, North Carolina's offered, schools like that have offered. And when Bama got involved, I think there was a little bit of, okay, let's see how this plays out. The interesting thing, Trevor, and this tells you what kind of player that this kid is, it came down to it where they weren't saying, well, why would you pick going to play receiver at Bama over playing Notre Dame? Well, he didn't, because he wasn't being recruited to play receiver at Alabama. He was recruited to play defensive back. That's he's a quarterback and a DB who Notre Dame's recruiting to play receiver. Bama was recruiting to play DB, and ultimately he decided he wanted to play offense. And so he visited Bama the week before he visited Notre Dame. He was supposed to go back for another Bama visit, which kind of tells you a little bit about Bama's interest in him. They were trying to get him back on campus, but ultimately he decided to commit to Notre Dame. So this is a huge, huge pickup. But it just kind of, if you like versatile athletes, the fact that Notre Dame just landed a receiver that they beat Bama for, and Bama was recruiting to play DB, tells you a lot about what you need to know about the kind of athlete that Antavious Richardson is.
First and foremost, I think it starts to tell you how competitive Notre Dame truly is on the recruiting trail. And since the start of Marcus Freeman's tenure, we've learned a lot about how he can recruit at a high level. And some of the bigger misses have been in the wide receiver room, right? Now, starting to pick up traction there, getting Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams and Logan Saldate. And this win over Bama with Antavious is huge for a multitude of reasons. One, Brian, to your point, Alabama was really interested in him. And in years past, Alabama was kind of that bully on the block when it came to recruiting, right? The second Alabama kind of stepped foot into the room, it was like, oh, all right, here we go. Kind of reminds me of that scene from The Blind Side when the Tennessee coach comes in to see Michael Orr play. It's like, oh, he's here. All right, let's just pack up and go home, right? So it's nice to see how competitive Notre Dame is being on that front. But I'm really excited to see what Antavious is going to do in South Bend. One, I think the deciding factor for him, and you hit the nail on the head, was dude is electric with the ball in his hand. And I think that's one of the reasons why he chose Notre Dame over Alabama, because he was going to get that opportunity. He was an electric athlete on both sides of the field, don't get me wrong. But his speed, his quickness, his athleticism, just it screams, yo, get the ball in my hands. Give me the football. And that is something that Notre Dame needs a lot more of on offense. Can't wait to see what he does when he gets to South Bend, Brian.
So when you talk about the class impact for Scrap Richardson, it really starts with, okay, how does he fit into the receiving situation? So number one is numbers. Well, Notre Dame's had 2 receivers committed. You had Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr., and Notre Dame wanted minimum 3 was the minimum you did not fail meeting your numbers need. The goal, the desire was always 4, at least 4. I could see a scenario in where they go to 5 if the right players want to come, but 4's the target number. So this gets you one step closer to your target number of 4. So that's number one. It's a win right there just from a number standpoint. Now, number 2, what kind of player are you adding? Are you meeting any needs with the type of player you're recruiting? And when you look at last year's recruiting class, and then you look at the year before's recruiting class, the guys that are still there, Notre Dame has some vertical players. Cam Williams is a vertical player. Micah Gilbert's a vertical player. Jaden Greathouse is a vertical player. What I mean by vertical player is not necessarily in the traditional burner sense, but more of they're guys that are working down the field. This is a kid that can bring some of that. I think Logan Saldate's got a little bit of, he can work vertically and laterally. I think KK Smith can do a little bit of that, but for the most part, you got a lot of vertical guys. You got guys that do damage. Ideally, are going to do damage running down the field. They're going to do damage getting open on routes. This is a kid that we don't know what kind of route runner he's going to be because I've never seen him run a route. But when you look at why you're recruiting him because he's got really good football speed. And 10.68 and 100-meter dash is pretty good speed. It's not like elite burner speed. That's pretty good speed. But you're bringing a kid that's really electric with the ball in his hands, as you mentioned, Trevor. And so that's a skill set they wanted. To me, this is essentially, it comes down to this. You drop Sean Terry. For full disclosure, not everyone at Notre Dame was on board necessarily taking Sean Terry when they took Sean Terry. There were some people that wanted him and others that didn't because they just felt, okay, it's a little early and, let's see what other kind of players are out there. Well, it ended up working out because this is the guy you're recruiting to replace Sean Terry. The first thing that they're going to do with Antavious Richardson, from what I'm told, is the plan as of right now. Things can change between now and in August or when he shows up or if he's an early enrollee. I'm not sure which one of those is going to be the case. But you've got a kid that they first project as a slot in this offense. Now, ultimately, Mike Denbrock wants to get to the point where guys play everywhere. We saw that at LSU, Trevor, where you never knew where Malik Neighbors was going to line up, and he'd like to get there. And this kid at 6'2" can bring a lot of Z to the table, depending on how he fills out. There's some things you could do with him in a boundary look, but where they like him is in that slot position because of how Mike Denbrock wants to use a slot position. You have to understand what the slot position is in Mike Denbrock's offense. Yes, there's an element of screen game, bubbles, quick slants, but Mike Denbrock uses the slot to work the vertical parts a lot as well. The slot fades, the seam routes, the crossers, the overs, things like that, where you want to get a guy kind of chasing. The other part of it, too, is when you look at the makeup of the other guys that they're recruiting, which we'll get into later, it also fits in well there. So they like the fact that he brings a lot to the table that they like in the slot, but more importantly, they wanted to get away from guys that can only do one thing. And the reality is Sean Terry, even if you think he was a great player, he was very limited. He was a niche type of guy. He was going to do this type of thing in your offense at 5'9" and what he could do. This is a kid that you could say, look, we like him in the slot, and they like him in the slot. But if another player emerges from the slot, you can easily put him back outside and say he can fit outside. That was important for Notre Dame, that they land someone that can be that type of slot player, but also someone that has the versatility to do what Mike Denbrock ultimately wants to do, which is move guys around. And you don't always know where guys are going to be. So when you talk about the class impact, Trevor, he fits the positional need. He gives you numbers, but he brings a skill set you're trying to get more and more and more of, which is give me more receivers that are dangerous once the ball is in their hands. Yes, he's stretched the field up, but can you do damage when the ball's in your hands? And that's certainly something that this young man brings to the table.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't have much more to add here, Brian, but you're absolutely right. It starts to create a little bit of diversity in the wide receiver room because in comparison, Notre Dame's taken the proper steps, right? Some of it is yet to be showcased on the field this year, but I do believe that from a skill set standpoint, Notre Dame's wide receiving core this year is more diverse than the tools that they had in it last year. Adding a guy like Antavious Richardson to this upcoming class will just start to add more to what Mike Denbrock has in his arsenal out at wide receiver. If there's one thing that Notre Dame has lacked from the wide receiver position year over year is it's been a dynamic playmaker. So I love the addition of Antavious Richardson, man. It's going to be a good it's going to be another really good athlete who can do things after the catch with the ball in his hands. We talked about it yesterday. Notre Dame needs to find more ways to have their receivers get more yards after the catch and start helping Riley Leonard pad some of those passing yard stats and start moving the ball down the field and making people miss and get people chasing. And Antavious Richardson is definitely a guy that can do that. So, again, really excited, man. Really excited to see him here.
And when you think about the direction of the quarterback position, obviously Mike Denbrock likes guys that can run if they're there. But when you think about Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr, Those are pass first guys. And so you need receivers that can also get down the field. You mentioned it right there, Trevor. That was an important piece because you're not going to be just an RPO based offense with a read zone quarterback like you are now. Even if Deuce Knight ends up at Notre Dame, and you guys all know my stance on whether or not I think he's going to end up at Notre Dame. You know, I'll believe it on, was it December 5th, whatever that may be. I'll believe when his signature comes in, I'll say, okay, cool, he's going to Notre Dame. But even him, the ultimate goal with Deuce is to turn him into more of a dual threat quarterback that's a passer first, runner second. You know what I mean? Like, yes, he's a dynamic runner, but Notre Dame does not intend, from my understanding, does not see Deuce like the next, what we see from Riley Leonard right now. They want it to be what they thought they were going to get from Riley Leonard, which is a guy that can drop back, throw the football, be effective in the throwing game. Oh, and by the way, he's a really dynamic runner. And then, of course, Noah Grubbs in the 2016 class or 2026 class. They want to be able to drop back and throw the football. And I do believe that there's a desire to get a little bit more length in the receiver room as well. So you went from a slot that's listed at 5'10" that I don't think is 5'10". I'm sorry. I've seen Sean Terry. Maybe he's 5'10", maybe. To now you're getting a guy that's 6'2" and is more of a modern type of a pro style slot, as opposed to sort of the college spread slot that Sean Terry was. And so I think that's helpful as well when you talk about the class impact. So met your numbers need, Trevor, added a skill set you wanted, and there's a positional fit for the guy that can be there. And look, I'm also curious to see just how much he fills out, because he's a pretty strong kid, even though he's skinny. And when you play quarterback and DB, you can see that part of his game. I'm curious to see how much he's going to fill out now once he starts playing one sport, because he's one of those kids that plays sport. He plays basketball in the winter. He runs track in the spring. Once he starts kind of just playing one sport, I'm curious to see what he's going to, what kind of player what kind of body he's going to develop into. And maybe there's some ability for him to even play at times in the boundary. So that's another part of his evolution, is I know where they see him now, but I love the fact that he doesn't have to only play that. How the roster shakes out can develop it, but also how his skill set shakes out is going to develop that. So very interesting player. So Trevor, are you ready to dive into some film? You ready to break down some film with this young man? Let's get to it, man. So we're gonna look at the film of Antavious Richardson, and then we're gonna dive into sort of a what's next type of situation, and then we'll get into our buy sell hold. So Trevor, let's bring up this film now of Antavious, and you guys are gonna see. Here's what I'm telling you: you're not gonna see. You're not gonna see catch a single pass. And you're not going to see him run a single route, but you're going to see him with the ball in his hands. And I mean, there's things he catches snaps and he catches punts and those type of things. But, this is a young man that doesn't necessarily bring proven receiver ability to the table. You're projecting. And as someone who played quarterback throughout his high school career and then started as a true freshman at wide receiver, it's not as hard of a transition as you might think. But you see right there, Trevor, just on this kick return, that this is a kid with vision. This is a kid that has some suddenness to him as an athlete. This is a young man that is elusive, and that's something that Notre Dame looks for. He's a long strider. You see that there. He's a guy that can make people miss in space, and I love the fact he's a quarterback, because quarterbacks, even guys who don't throw a ton, and he doesn't throw a ton, you got to have some level of football IQ.
Yeah. And
some level of leadership and some level of vision of the football field to play quarterback. And you kind of see it from him as a runner here. And Trevor, this is a perfect example of a guy that's just smart, sees the field, finds that crease, and then uses his athleticism to hit it. And then he makes a big play with it.
He's very explosive once he finds that crease too, which is something really promising that you would look for in a slot wide receiver. Look, if anybody needs to know how good of an athlete this guy is, Brian and I both played quarterback back in the day. I can confidently say, I don't know about you, Brian. I can confidently say that I was on no side of kick return. So
I was a pretty good athlete. So I returned punts and kicks. And like I said, I started as a true freshman. I moved to receiver at the end of my freshman year, and I went against Shenard Newby, who played at UVA my first game as a receiver, and I caught 5 balls on him. He did beat me for a 70-yard touchdown, but I fell. I tipped the ball and then fell, and he caught it. And then my second game as a receiver, I scored 5 touchdowns, 4 receiving and 1 pick six. So we were a little different type of athlete playing quarterback back in high school, Trevor. So, but your point stands. Most quarterbacks are. CJ Carr wasn't on that. Noah Grubbs isn't on that.
Yeah.
Right. So your point
Yeah.
stands. I'm just not a good example for that.
Well, hey, no worries. That's awesome. I did not know that. Listen, in
I know I
another
don't
life,
look
I
like
wish
it
I
now,
could.
but I used to be kind of fast and athletic. I know I look like a nose guard now, but it wasn't always the case.
No, you're all right. I look like Ben Roethlisberger right now in the latter part of his career. So look, I hear you, man. You're all good. But no, this goes to show you how dynamic of an athlete Antavious Richardson can be. That was actually a really accurate pass as well. I mean, he's somebody that, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record with this kid, but Notre Dame needs more guys who have that mentality of, I just need the ball in my hands. And he has that here. Somebody that is willing to go out, play on kick return. He is tucking and running. He has really good ball carrying vision
right here.
Yeah.
But yeah, keep going, Trevor.
Yeah, he's somebody that Notre Dame needs in their wide receiver room to add depth. And I'm not saying that they don't have that right now. I'm not staking the claim that Notre Dame has zero guys who demand the football and can be that guy. But again, like we talked about before, he's somebody that can add diversity to your receiving room. Mm-hmm. It helps hit your depth from a numbers perspective. So really excited to see another dynamic athlete added to this room, not just, a bigger 6'5", 6'4" tall guy, or just a 5'9" slot guy. He's Antavious Richardson, just especially depending on how he fills out, looks like a guy that could do a lot.
I like this one. I mean, the last play too, Trevor. You see his suddenness. He's not like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy. He's more smooth than he is like crazy sudden, and so it can kind of mask how kind of quick he does, change direction. And you see the toughness there. I mean, that's the thing. Like, look, this is a quarterback. I mean, that's kind of thing. Yeah, it's quick, but you got physicality. Can you play the physical part of the game? And you're seeing that right there. And you see this right here again. Look at the change of direction, which for a tall kid is pretty unique in my opinion. You don't see a lot of 6'2" kids that kind of change direction like that. He's got a little bit of that lankiness to him. And he brings a lot to the table, man. Here's another play of him playing defense and coming downhill and drilling a running back in the backfield. And I know for a fact that like Mike Mickens, for example, on defense loves two-way players. Like he loves, and not every kid, like Benjamin Morrison played a little receiver, but he wasn't a big time two-way player. Jaden Mickey wasn't a two-way player. Not every kid is a two-way player, but that's a bonus. That's brownie points for him when you're recruiting two-way players, because you have guys that understand the other side of the ball. You know what DBs think. You know what those guys think. Same thing on the other side. If you played wide receiver, like Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary have been very successful high school receivers, running backs. Dallas has done a little bit everything. They kind of know what's in the mind of a receiver because they have to be that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he brings a lot of that, but I love the toughness that he brings to the table, on top of the fact that, because he's a kind of a skinny kid, but like look at him taking on this block. He's multiple snaps like this where he just comes up and just kind of throws his body into a guy, and then you see him chase the guy down and knock the ball out. So he brings a lot of that to the table. You see size. Well, shouldn't say size. You see length. You see athleticism. You see some burst. You see some ability to stretch the field. You see toughness. Like look at him there as a runner. Bounce. I mean, bounces off. Okay, bounces off that tackle. Makes that guy miss. Makes that guy miss. Then he bounces off that guy's tackle. Then he runs through that guy, and they finally bring him down at the 7-yard line. Like this isn't a kid who's just athletic. This is a kid that brings a lot of playmaking ability to the table, as we mentioned, and you guys can see that. And he's playing in Georgia. In his league isn't like the big league, but they play some good teams. And so he's playing against other good athletes, and that's something that you like to see as well. And I'm always a big fan of getting more kids out of the state of Georgia. I think that's an ascending state when it comes to producing big-time football players. Yeah. And this is another example of that. So here's more of him playing defense, reading the bubble screen, good pursuit, brings the guy down in space. And, look at the patience there. Reading the play, knows his job. He's got to make sure the ball doesn't get outside of him, does a nice job of that, and then ends up making the tackle. So we've seen this kid make plays as a kick returner. We've seen this kid make plays at quarterback as a runner. There he is taking a muff snap. and making a play out of it. We've seen him throw the ball down the field. We've seen him come up and make tackles. We've seen him force fumbles. We've seen him break tackles. I mean, this, when you talk about it, Trevor, like, what position does he play? It's like, this kid's a football player. You figure that out. And the other thing too is, let's just say Notre Dame gets loaded at wide receiver and he's 7th or 8th on the depth chart, and you've got a need at safety or a need at corner. You're like, hey man, you can go over there and play right now. And if he's willing to do that, you've got a kid that can do that. And I always like kids like that. Always like kids like that. And I mean, it brings a little bit to the table of what you were getting from the Robinson kid that went to Washington, who you liked at receiver, but other schools like the DB and a guy that, hey, he could do that if the need ever arose. He brings a little bit of that to the table as well.
He's such a smooth runner for somebody that's 6'2". I mean, it's really impressive to watch. He does a really good job of sinking his hips and keep his shoulders over his toes. Like when he's making a cut, like a lot of times with a guy that tall and like that lanky, cuts aren't always as smooth as what they look like. They run pretty stand up. So
usually a little tight hipped.
Yep.
And he's not really, I mean, a tad, but overall, I mean, this is a kid that changes direction with like, look at that move right there, Trevor. Like, let's run that one back here real quick. Just how quickly he's able to, he catches the snap right there, right? Scrambling, makes an immediate vertical cut. That's quick move number one. That also requires vision. Then he makes a move there, but then look at that, setting that guy up. Look at this cut down the field, like boom, and he's just right out of that cut and accelerating again. And that's stuff like that I like. And then he runs into a guy and he's dragging 4 guys. Like, they literally don't tackle him on the play. It takes 4 guys to grab him and he doesn't go down. Like, and now you see why he's not playing quarterback. Like, he's not a quarterback. He's just the best player in his high school football team. Like,
he's a guy that needs the football in his hands.
Right. Exactly. That's smart coaching, honestly.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, by his high school team is like, this is by far our best football player. Let's just put him in a position where he's touching the ball every single time the ball snapped. So you guys see a little bit of Antavious Richardson, and I think you guys can see why there's a lot of people on him. I have a friend of mine who's he's almost 60 now, and he's been breaking out high school film since he was a teenager. And he's as he's gotten older, he's gotten a little crankier, and he's just harder to please him. And from day one, he's like, this is, of all the offers, this is the kid that I want. That's the kid that I want. I mean, he was super high on him. Talked to one of my sources on the other side of this conversation at ND, and it's just like that. Like when he was, I don't even know how he was discovered. I haven't gotten that backstory yet. But as soon as they made the transition and he kind of got on the board, there were some people that were immediately like, get him. And then there's another kid that people are that way about as well. So, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about him in the class at some point in time as well down the road. So a big pickup for Notre Dame. Let's talk about what's next, Trevor, because as I mentioned, Notre Dame would like to get, essentially what I was told is that Notre Dame is going to add 3 more receivers. This is before Scrap committed. They're going to add 3. They'd like to add ideally 3 more receivers to the roster, whether that's 1 high school kid and 2 transfers, 2 high school kids and 1 transfer, or 3 high school kids. That's the goal. Now 4 is where they really need to be. And this gets you closer to the 4. I'm actually, as long as you keep the guys you have, I'm actually okay with 4 and not necessarily adding a transfer and you 1 more high school kid. But the portal is certainly part of the conversation. There's still more room for high school kids. And so let's talk about what's next at that position. And we'll kind of begin with visits and kind of the lineup for visits. So the first young man to look at for Notre Dame is Isaiah Mizell, who visited this past weekend from Florida. Reminds me a lot of Scrap, actually, as far as similar body type, taller, skinnier. He's not as tall as Scrap. He's committed to Arizona, and he's faster, but he's faster. So he's not as tall, but like the body type is similar, is I guess where I'm getting to the similarities between Isaiah Mizell and Scrap Richardson. Is very similar body type, skinny, taller, long-legged type of kid. Scrap Richardson's more of an after the catch, dynamic with the ball in his hands. Mizell to me is more of a line him up at Z and run fast vertical routes. I mean, that's kind of his thing, is he can do some things after the catch, but you're getting a guy that's really fast. And I believe he's a 10-4. Let me go look at that. I want to look up. I believe if I remember correctly, I believe Isaiah Mazel was a 10.4 guy in the 100-meter dash, but I'm not. Yeah, 10.49 is his fastest time in the 100-meter dash, which is really fast, and he's consistently in the 10.6, 10.7 range. So very, very dynamic athlete, but more of a vertical player. So he'd be a bit of a compliment to a guy like him. Now, talked to somebody last night about Isaiah Mizell. He likes Notre Dame a lot, Trevor, and can definitely see himself at Notre Dame. However, there's a lot of big-time schools ramping their interest up on him. And as of today, or I should say as of last night, and I was having this conversation about midnight, the plan for him is to get out and see more places. Just fine. Notre Dame's okay with that. They understood that. They knew that when he came and visited. So they're going to stay on him and keep recruiting him. But they did a great job with his visit. I mean, nailed the visit last week. He could see himself at Notre Dame, fit in really well with the players, and Notre Dame did a great job with their pitch to him. So he's receiver number one. Have you had a chance to see Isaiah Mizell yet, Trevor?
I watched some of his film. I haven't dug too deep into him yet. Just popped off the page when I saw that in 2023 he had 21 receiving touchdowns, which I think was a school record for them. So that's what caught my eye. But everything that I noticed was exactly what you had brought up. He's really fast. He is somebody that Notre Dame would use to stretch the field vertically. Now, we talked about it before of what the quarterback room is going to start to look like for Notre Dame as well. And that would start to line up with when you have guys like Mizell and Richardson coming into their own. But in short, yeah, I've seen a little bit of Mizell, and he's very fast, very fast.
You always can. You can always add guys. Always be okay adding guys with that kind of speed.
Mm-hmm.
Another player on the board for Notre Dame, and this is really where a lot of the focus is right now, of the guys that we'll actually mention, is another guy on the board. There's they talked to, like, I think the Brown kid who's committed to UCLA. They're not on him anymore. Raiden Vines Bright's a kid that they've looked at. Hasn't really gone too far right now. He's still committed to Washington. But the other guy that Notre Dame is really making a move on, and they're going to get him on campus next weekend, is SMU commit Jalen Cooper, who plays at Steele High School in Cibolo, Texas. This is my top receiver on the board of the new offers, and kind of has been. I really like Scrap Richardson, but the difference between Scrap and Jalen Cooper, primary number one, is Jalen Cooper dominates at wide receiver in Texas at a very high level. And, as I was having a conversation with somebody today, and I said, look, I understand the desire to add speed, and obviously that's important, but Notre Dame can't afford to also ignore the fact that they need guys that know how to play football. And this kid knows how to play football. I mean, you're talking about a kid that last year, Trevor, had 63 catches for 1,578 yards and 23 touchdowns. So they went to the state championship game, lost the state championship game. So I think he played 15 games. He failed to score a touchdown in 2 games. And he had double-digit touchdowns in 6 games. And he had a touchdown in every single playoff game that they played last year. So this is a really talented football player, a kid that has some athleticism. I think he's one of those guys that has sort of that gear is going to come when he gets to college and gets in the college strength program. But even now, you see a tall, smooth, athletic kid that can run, has great feet, great vision, knows how to play the position, knows how to run routes, and just dominates. And I don't know what his 40 time is. At this point in time, I really don't care. This kid knows how to play, and he dominates at one of the highest levels in the country. And the film is super impressive, super impressive. So that he'll be on campus next weekend when they play Stanford. He's one of the guys that I know that Jadon Blair, we'll have another story on Jadon Blair coming up, but spoke with Jadon Blair late last week. He's one of the reasons that Jadon's coming back October 12th is because he wants to get to know Jalen Cooper, and Jadon has kind of taken on a little bit of a leadership role in the 2025 class. But this is a guy that I know there's a lot of people at Notre Dame that really like this kid, and they understand there's other guys that are faster, at least now. Not that this kid's slow. Don't get me wrong. Jalen Cooper's not slow. You don't dominate Texas and average like 20 yards a catch if you're slow. It's just he's not like 4.3, 4.4 fast like some people are talking about. But he's a very good athlete, dynamic football player, and just again, sometimes you just got to look. And this is the mistake. You know what it is? Jalen Cooper, to me, is them rectifying the mistake they made with Dalen McCutcheon, where you get too wrapped up in, well, maybe he doesn't have this and he doesn't have this, and you can look past what you may think he doesn't have and ignore the fact this guy's a freaking great receiver. He may not, and you look at the NFL, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of guys dominating in the NFL that you look at and say they weren't combine warriors. They weren't guys that had elite size or elite speed. They just knew they were good athletes and knew how to play. And when I look at Jalen Cooper, I'm like, this kid's, I don't care what his 40 time is. I don't care if it's a 4.5 or 4.6. This kid's playing in Texas in one of the best areas in the country, and he's dominant. And he's doing it against other future college football players. So when I watch that kid's film, I'm like, dude, this guy's a good football player. And I think he's a kid that's got a gear in him. Like I said before, it's like I thought Will Fuller was going to have another gear when he got to college. Now, what I've said was I thought he had another gear. I didn't think he was going to go from a 4.5, which he ran a 4.55 at the opening going into his senior year. And I know that because I was at the opening and they were announcing the 40 times of former players that are now in the NFL, and they announced Will Fuller from where he was in Pennsylvania, who ran I think it was like a 4.53, which is pretty good. Then he went to Notre Dame, went to a 4.32. I thought he'd get down to like mid to high 4.4s. You know what I'm saying? And some guys do that. Not all guys do that. Jalen Cooper strikes me as a guy that as he focuses on football only and gets to college and gets in a strength program, and he's a guy that to me is going to get another gear as a runner. But man, this guy is just a dominant football player, Trevor. It's like if you could get him and Scrap Richardson to go with Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr., all of a sudden I'm like, okay, the process wasn't great, but the end result is pretty flipping good. That's how I feel about those two. And you could make the same case with Isaiah Mizell, but there's a little bit more projection with him because he would kind of be replacing Tanook Hines. And honestly, I kind of like his film a little bit better than Tanook's, to be honest with you. But this kid, to me, if you were able to somehow get Jalen Cooper and Scrap Richardson to go with Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr. And James Flanagan at tight end, all of a sudden I'm not at all worried about and for people that care about rankings, On3 did rank Scrap Richardson. They're the only one that's regraded him since his senior year, and in their most recent rankings, they actually put him into the top 300. And then they have Jalen Cooper just outside the top 100. I graded Jalen Cooper out as a top 100 player, and I grade Scrap Richardson out as a top 250 player. So these are good football. These aren't 3-star projects, in my opinion. These are kids that can come in and help you out early because they bring a different for different reasons, but they're kids that I think can come in and in their first 2 years help you out. In the case of Scrap, and in the case of Jalen Cooper, he's the kind of kid that might be able to come in and help you out day one because of just how advanced he is as a football player.
Jalen Cooper does a lot of things naturally that you like seeing in somebody that is that young. Already you go back and you look at the film, and he's already starting to stack routes, right? He's already started to stack defenders when he's going deep. To your point, he's not a burner yet. I mean, that could come. Not to say that he's a slow guy, but if you go back through and you watch his film, he naturally does things that you like to see football players do. He's a multi-sport athlete that is also good at football. You look at a guy like Jalen Cooper, and you can tell this guy was put on this earth to play football, right? He's really good after the catch, which is one common theme that I'm seeing from what Mike Denbrock is looking to bring to South Bend, are guys who are electric after the catch. Not saying that he's taking a look at guys like Malik Neighbors and just saying, hey, let's copy paste that. But he saw how successful it was down in Louisiana, right? So I like Notre Dame going hard after Jalen Cooper. Definitely adds a more dynamic playmaking ability to the wide receiver class. So excited to hear that he's going to be back on campus next week. Is he back?
This will be his first trip. This will be his first trip to campus. Yeah, Jalen Cooper hasn't visited yet. He will be on campus next weekend for the Stanford game.
Okay.
October 12th. So Notre Dame's going on the road the end of this week. They are not hosting anyone this weekend. And a reminder, they flipped Scrap Richardson from South Florida. Isaiah Mizell's committed to Arizona, and Jalen Cooper is he's committed to SMU. So those are the three that right now. There's a couple other kids, and I can't release their names, but there's a couple other kids they're talking to, and including a kid that that they had recruited a while ago and fell off of, and they're trying to see if they get back on, that kind of thing. But these are the main guys right now that are kind of out there. I do think that they're going to continue expanding the board, because right now you look where they stand with Jalen Cooper. I think Notre Dame is a major player in that one, major player. But that's different than saying, okay, he's going to pull the trigger and leave the state of Texas. Part of the reason he picked SMU is because he wanted to stay in state. And so that's the hurdle for Jalen Cooper. And we'll see if that can continue or not. But, getting him up on campus next week is big. And, we'll see if they can make that impression. And again, there's, as of right now, Deuce Knight's supposed to be there that weekend as well. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully, if he is not flipped by then, that the track record will change a little bit for receivers picking Notre Dame the weekends that they visit with Deuce. Hasn't been great so far, but having Jadon Blair and some of the other commits on campus will be big for Notre Dame that weekend as well. So that's where we're at with receiver recruiting right now, Trevor. This is a very important commitment for Notre Dame, getting Antavious, Scrap, Richardson in the class. We broke it down. Love the kids' film. Got a lot to learn, right? I think Ryan said it in the chat. We're going to find out with a kid like this if Mike Brown can develop receivers, because this is a kid that is a developmental player. I don't view him as a project. I personally, and that may be my bias, because I went like from 1 week I'm playing quarterback to the next week I'm playing receiver. And, my whole life I'm playing quarterback. And then as a true freshman, I'm starting at receiver for a top 25, college football team at the level I played at. So I think with a good coach, you can make that move and make that move relatively quickly. But you've got to be someone that knows how to start with the basics with a player. And hopefully Notre Dame will be able to do that. So we'll see how that goes. So that's going to do it for this part of the show. We're going to do Buy, Sell, Hold next, folks. But before we do, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And if you've not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Trevor, it is time for Buy, Sell, Hold. And we're going to have some fun with this one today. This is your second Buy, Sell, Hold. So you're going to become a Buy, Sell, Hold veteran here before too long, my friend. So you guys know the rules. This is for premium members only. So we have a post on the board about Buy, Sell, Hold. And if you're a premium member of the board, I was not a project, Salty. You don't start as a true freshman if you're a project, my friend. I was a baller, okay? I was a baller, Salty. Speak that blasphemy by being a project. What's wrong with you, my man? I love Salty. If you are a premium board member, you get to submit your buy, sell, hold question. It is meant to be more of a you make a statement, and then we respond whether we buy it, sell, or hold it. If you want to get something in day of or during the show, you can always submit a super chat. And so we do have a super chat buy, sell, hold. And so we'll start with that here in a second. But the rest of them will be just from premium members unless you want to have your super chat read as well. So, Trevor, my friend, are you ready to go for round two? I promised it wouldn't be a 5-hour-long show this time. So we got about 30 submissions. So we'll definitely keep it under 5 hours. But a lot of great submissions today. So you ready to rock and roll, man, with round two of your buy, sell, hold career?
Yes, sir. Let's get after it.
Okay. We're going to start off with a super chat from our guy, AST12321.
Fantastic. Thank you for the super chat. Buy, sell, hold. Barring further catastrophic injuries, Notre Dame will be undefeated heading into USC.
Yeah, I'll buy that. Trevor. I mean, for the first part, I'll buy that, because even with the injuries they've suffered, so if we assume that Boubacar's out, right? And they're going to get Burnham back. They're going to eventually get Rubio back. They're going to eventually get Schrouth back. As long as there's no more catastrophic injuries, I think their defensive line is still good enough to beat the rest of the teams on their schedule. So, So until USC, because I think they can beat Georgia Tech. It's not going to be easy. I think they can still beat the service academies. They can beat Virginia, Stanford, UVA. It's really the next. You'd have to lay an egg to lose to anyone on your schedule between now and USC. Even Georgia Tech is a good football team. You'd have to kind of not play well to lose that game. So yes, I'm going to have them at 10-1 going into the USC game. What say you?
I'll buy that as well. mostly for the points that you just highlighted. So, barring anything crazy, Notre Dame would have to go out and sleepwalk through a football game to lose to anybody on their schedule leading up until USC. And that is not a testament to say Notre Dame's remaining opponents are really bad. It's Notre Dame is 4-1 with 2 top 25 wins and has shown that they can out talent a lot of football teams with depth. I mean, even a team like Louisville, who's a top 15 team. Ben Morrison was hurt for a little bit during that game. Christian Gray was out that game. Jordan Clark had to play some field corner. Leonard Moore was a true freshman, got his first start. Bryce Young is starting to have to grow up a lot quicker than what a lot of people were expecting prior to the start of the season. So Notre Dame has the depth in a lot of those positions, but catastrophic injury, I would think something like, God forbid, an Xavier Watts goes down, right? Or another offensive lineman goes down. So
don't even speak that into existence, Trevor. We're just we know what catastrophic injury means. We don't have to, we don't have to go there yet. That would be, that'd be tough. That'd
so
be tough.
barring a, yes, I'm buying the first part 100%. Part 2 from AST 12321. If Notre Dame goes 11-1, they will make it past first round in the playoffs.
I'm going to buy that as well, Trevor, because it's if they run the table, they will have had to work out some of the kinks that are going on with the team, including you don't show up every week. And you drop games you shouldn't drop. If they're 11-1, it means they got past that. And then they went on the road and beat what I think is a really good USC football team. So if they're good enough to do that and end the season with a win over USC on the road, then that tells me, A, they're going to be a 5 to 6 seed, in my opinion, by then, 7 at worst. And so then you're going to get a lower seeded team, potentially a group of 5, depending on what your seeding is. And you're going to be able to win that game at home. So yes, you're gonna have some SEC team that's 3rd or 4th in the league, or that's going to be coming up north to come play you in your place in December. So yeah, I will say that. I will say that if Notre Dame's 11-1 going into the playoff, that they would win their first round game. Because again, it assumes people say, well, not if they don't do this and not if they don't fix that. But again, the submission is they're 11-1, right? If they're 11-1, a lot of those things that we're grumpy about now have clearly been addressed to some degree, or at least some of them have, to the level of they were able to run the table. And that type of team can beat a 10 to 12 seed. That's,
100%.
Yep,
I'm buying that as well. Yeah, I'm buying that as well. If Notre Dame runs the table, they'll have most likely, especially if Louisville and Texas A&M finish out the season like we think that they will, USC will still be ranked by the end of the season, pending how their season turns out until Notre Dame goes out to California. So you're looking at a Notre Dame team that'll be 11-1 with 3 top 25 wins, 2 of which are on the road. And like we've all discussed before, the committee weighs heavily. It's a bigger factor who you beat than who you lose to. And odds are you're going to have a team that is a Southern team coming up to South Bend in December for a home playoff game, which, if there's anything that we know about Marcus Freeman up to this point, those are the types of games that he gets his team up for. So, yeah, I'll buy that, making it past the first round of the playoffs for sure.
Well, and the other one would be is they could get a Big Ten team, sure, the 3rd or 4th Big Ten team, which would be a team most likely from the North. But I'm not overly concerned about that type of opponent, to be completely honest with you. Like, I'm not as concerned about if Penn State's a 10 or 11 seed. I like Notre Dame in that matchup because, again, we're working with the premise that Notre Dame was able to get some of those issues fixed.
Sure.
And, that's kind of where it'll be at. But there's a lot to before we get there. And I know that there's some people that are, they got to fix this, and let me complain about that. Let me be grumpy about this. That's not perfect, and all those things are true because they're still a flawed football team as of right now. But they're a flawed football team with a lot of talent that's beating 2 top 25 teams right now. There's not a single team in college football that can say that as of right now, that they've got 2 wins over top 25 football teams. And I don't believe that's going to change this weekend when I look at the slate, because there's not a lot of great games this weekend that we're going to be picking from. So, we'll kind of see how that plays out. But, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. So good start to the show. And I know
Yeah.
there's another buy so hold that brings up being undefeated before we get to USC that we'll get to as well. So let's get into the submitted questions from our premium members, from our board members. If you, as we said, if you want to get another one of your buy so holds submitted that's not in there now, you can go ahead and throw in a super chat. But Trevor, let's rock and roll with the rest of these super chats.
You got it.
We got 3, so we'll go one at a time. Whenever somebody has multiples, we'll just take them one at a time.
Irish English, buy, sell, hold. Florida State under 3.5 wins for the season.
I mean, Trevor, I'm looking at this, and this is a hard one for me, because when I watch the way Florida State's playing right now, it's like I don't know who they beat. I mean, outside of Charleston Southern, I don't know who they beat. I mean, right now, yeah, Florida's got some problems, but Florida has looked much better so far than Florida State has. I mean, like Florida State got beat by Texas A&M. And they got rolled early, but they battled in that game. Like they're just not a very good football team.
Yeah.
And I watched Florida State, and I'm like, that team has quit. I mean, they've absolutely quit. Florida just went on the road this weekend and beat a Mississippi State by 17 points in the game they controlled. I mean, they were competitive at least in the first quarter or two with Miami. Miami ran away with it, but like they were battling it. It wasn't competitive. You never felt like Florida's going to win. But what I mean by competitive is, I mean, the manner in which they were playing, they were competing against Miami. Miami is just way better than they were. They're just not a really well-coached football team, but they were at least playing hard. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where when I watch Florida State play, it's like they don't even want to be out there.
Nope.
I mean, it is like SMU beat the brakes off of them last weekend. And it's like, you'd think like maybe, and honestly, if we're being real about this, they should be 0-5. Cal should have beat them. I don't say lucky, because they did make some plays late, but I thought for the most part, Cal outplayed them, and Cal just couldn't put them away. But like, this is a team that, and I said, this is a team that's a lot closer to being 0-5 than they are from being like, having 2 or 3. Oh, they had some bread. Like they were never really competitive against Memphis.
Nope.
They were never competitive against Boston College. They were never competitive against SMU. And, like I said, Cal had a 9-7 lead on them going into the fourth quarter. You know what I mean? So this is a team that's a mess. And I thought the officiating helped Cal out as much as anything, calling them for 10 penalties in that game. So, I mean, Cal outgained Florida State 410 to 284. And sometimes that can be a misleading stat, like Notre Dame Louisville. But if you watch that game, it wasn't. It wasn't a misleading stat. They outplayed them. They just couldn't put the ball in the end zone and couldn't finish all drives. They settled for I think 3 field goals, right? They didn't get any touchdowns. They settled for 3 field goals. A 25-yard field goal and a 29-yard field goal were their first 2 touchdowns, which meant they were kicking the ball from the 15 and the 19, which meant they were snapping the ball from inside the 10 and just outside the 10. They just couldn't put the ball in the end zone. You put the ball in the end zone on one of those, and we're having a different conversation about this football game. So, I don't know who they're going to beat, Trevor. I mean, here's Florida State's schedule the rest of the way. They've got Clemson this weekend, loss. At Duke. I mean, they can win that game. Duke is 5-0, but let's be honest. Duke beat Elon, Northwestern, UConn. Northwestern was in overtime, by the way. It's a quality win. UConn by 5. They blew up Middle Tennessee State. And then this past weekend at home, they beat North Carolina 21-20. That's the same North Carolina team that the week before got boat raced by James Madison 70-50. So, good win. But you look at Duke, they're scrappy. They play hard. They play quality defense. And they can run the ball okay. They could lose that game. At Miami, that's going to be a destruction. That's a statement game for Miami, and the stadium would be packed. Like the crowd they had early against Virginia Tech was embarrassing for a top 10 football team. By the end, it was a little bit bigger. But then you get North Carolina at home. Who knows where they're going to be right then? At Notre Dame, that's probably going to be a beatdown. And then they get Charleston Southern at home, and then they get Florida at home. I'm struggling to go with the over here. Like, I feel like they're going to wake up at some point in time, and that's the reason I want to go over. But, dude, it's like I don't know if they haven't shown up by now. if anything, you're going to see guys literally start to quit.
Yeah.
Over the next couple weeks, if they go out and get curb stomped, and because their next 3 games, Trevor, they got Clemson, bye, at Duke, at Miami. I could see dudes opting out after the Miami game. So if they don't, you know what I mean? And even if they beat Duke, that's at 2 wins. If they have guys opting out, I don't see them beating North Carolina and Florida. I could see them getting to 3. I have a hard time getting to 4 wins for them, dude. I'm serious. The way that they're playing right now, I have a hard time. And D. Hunter nailed this. He kept asking me, like, Florida State's going to start 0-2. And I'm like, dude, I just don't see it, man. I don't see how they're going to lose to Georgia Tech and Boston College. I just don't see it. Well, now I see it. Now I see what he saw. Because he watched them in the spring. He's like, I couldn't believe how soft they were. And just like they didn't want to be out there. I'm like, it's a spring game. I don't care about all that. Well, usually I don't care about spring games, but this is one I maybe should have.
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't see how I'm going under, dude. I don't see it. I don't see how I don't know who they beat. So what are you going on that one?
Yeah,
so I'm buying the under is essentially what I'm doing right now.
To be honest with you, and it might be a little bullish of me, but I'm hard buying this for a multitude of different reasons. One, their schedule. I mean, even after the Miami game, North Carolina is a team that has shown that they can put up points. Understand that they got boat raced by James Madison, but they still hung 50. Mind you, they lost by 20, but it's crazy to say that you lose by 20 points and you scored 50, I know, right? Which is crazy to think about. And at Notre Dame, the fan in me and also the football analyst in me wants to say that will be essentially a non-compete up in South Bend on November 9th.
If it's not, we're going to have some major bad conversations after that game.
You want to talk about I
don't even want to say
post-game.
Yeah. That'll be a long post game. And I will be driving home, jumping in the car right after the game so I can get home for the post game show.
Yep.
That's one I will jump on if that happens. But anyway.
So between the opponents that they have left on their schedule and how they look on the field from, I don't want to call it like from an athletic standpoint, but nobody on that team is going to look overly athletic if nobody wants to be out there.
Right.
Nobody's going to look like a phenomenal football player if it looks like they're clocking in, getting ready to go to a 9 to 5 when they're out there. So, I'm hard buying that. I really am, just because Florida State has given me no reason to believe that they can turn their season around. If so, I think that turnaround needs to be studied, and Mike Norvell, is up for candidate for Coach of the Year if he's able to turn around whatever the heck has happened down in Tallahassee so far. So not actually up for Coach of the Year, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. That's crazy that we're both buying that. You hard bought it. I tried to talk myself into selling it, but I couldn't. They've burned me too many times this year. They really have.
Yeah.
I said real quick, I said before the year that, or when they first started losing, I said, there's no way Mike Norvell gets fired. Like, what he did the last 2 years was too good. But I'm like, if they end up being as bad as we're talking about and we're right and they go in the under, that is bad enough to consider a move. 3-9 is bad enough to consider a move, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with the transfers that they added too. Heard nothing about the Alabama transfers that were coming into Florida State. You get DJU from Oregon State, who's coming off of a halfway decent season, and whatever happened, it was just a complete collapse.
Everybody keeps blaming DJ, but let me just remind people that DJ Uiagalelei, who's not a very good quarterback, won 8 games in the Pac-12 last year and won over 10 games the year before as a starting quarterback in this same league. Right? He has a conference championship win. He was a starting quarterback on a team that won the ACC 2 years ago. Yes, he's not playing well, but for people blaming this on the quarterback, it's even lazier than people who blame everything going on in Notre Dame on Riley Leonard, because this is a kid who won 19 games last year as starting quarterback. He's not playing well, but he's not the reason that team has no heart, no fire, no physicality whatsoever. because then he also just came from a team that played with great physicality in Oregon State. So that is a huge problem, and it shows the danger of being a portal program. Sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't, but eventually you are so driven by the portal that you have no culture for those new portal players to be coming into because you've turned your roster over so much. That's a problem.
Irish English, buy, sell, hold. Nebraska under 8.5 wins for the season.
Ooh, that's what's their? Let's look at their schedule because they're what? They're 4-1 right now, right? Because they just beat. They're 3-1 or 4-1. What are they? Which one are they? They're 4-1.
4-1.
So they've beaten. They beat Purdue on the road. They beat Colorado at home, UTEP at home, Northern Iowa at home. They've got Rutgers this weekend. I mean, that's a big game for that, Trevor, because like whether they win or lose against Rutgers is going to determine that. I've got them beating Rutgers, so I got them at 5-1. Then they have back-to-back home games against Indiana and Ohio State. Okay, we'll see how those go. Then they're home against UCLA, so that gives them 6 wins. At USC, Wisconsin at home. I think they win that game, and then they're at Iowa. So that gets them to 7 games if they just hold serve at home against 3 unranked teams. So then they'd have to go 0-4 in their 4 road games to not be to 8 wins. So I'm gonna sell that because I think between Iowa, Indiana, and USC, those 3, they've got a shot to win at least one. And I would actually rank the difficulty in that order: Indiana, Iowa, and USC. Boy, that's because I think Dylan Raiola might struggle on the road against that defense. Kind of like we saw against Illinois, where he did a lot of good things, but they were able to force him into some big mistakes because he's a freshman and they could shut down the run game. But yeah, I'm gonna sell that because I just look at their schedule, and if they hold serve at home, they're at 7 wins. Actually, you know what? He said 8.5.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
That's get to 9. So I'm actually going to sell that now, or I'm going to buy that now because the way Indiana's playing, I don't know if they can win 2 of those road games. And that's how important that home loss to Illinois was. Yeah, so now that I'm looking at that, actually, Irish English, my head, I was thinking I had to get to 8. I'm actually going to buy that because those 4 road games, you just got to win 1 to get to 8. You've got to win 2 to get to 9.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a little bit tougher. It's possible, but I'm gonna buy it, but I'm not buying it with great, because I think Nebraska is going to keep getting better. I think Dylan Raiola is going to keep getting better. You know what I mean? Like if Iowa tries to do this thing in Illinois, it's the same thing that Illinois did. Maybe by that time he's better positioned to make some of those plays and not make some of those mistakes that cost him. You know, taking sack on 4th down, throwing interceptions, things like that hurt him in the 4th quarter. Well, now if he's got 11 games under his belt, maybe he makes a couple of those plays and they end up winning some of those football games. That's because as Illinois has proven, they got a pretty scrappy defense this year, Trevor. I mean, they got a really scrappy defense this year. And he still made some insane plays in that game. It's just the big freshman mistakes that you know is going to happen to any freshman. I don't care who you are, when the team asks you to carry him. Because Clemson didn't ask Trevor Lawrence to carry them until the postseason. I mean, he was just don't F it up until they got to the postseason. By that point in time, he had 9-10 starts under his belt. So I'm still gonna buy it. I'm just not sure. That 9 is going to be a little tougher after that Illinois loss.
I'm going to buy that as well. Assuming Nebraska wins out at home, they're going to have to sneak away 2 wins at IU, at Ohio State, at USC, or at Iowa. I agree with you that Dylan Raiola is going to continue to develop, and he's been exciting to watch up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think the IU game is also going to be pretty interesting for me as well, because what they're putting out on film right now is really good. And IU is obviously, this is the best start. Isn't this the best start that they've had since like 1950 something? Starting 5-0. I think it's the best start IU's had since.
I heard something like it's a long time. Yeah, I remember hearing a graphic, but I don't remember what year it was. But that it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, which is awesome, and it's awesome for the state of Indiana, and it's fantastic. I would like to see what IU looks like when they start to play more level competition. So that IU Nebraska game is going to be a lot of fun to follow and fun to track. Were you going to say something?
I'm trying to get better at not cutting you off. It's something I'm working on, so you keep going. So I'll.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Your point.
And I will say, like, Maryland was one of those teams going into the game. They were 3-1.
Yes.
Yeah, and so Maryland
and they were coming. They'd beaten Virginia on the road by a couple touchdowns. They battled Michigan State in a close game. It was a home game for Indiana, so that makes it a little bit different than some of these games that Indiana's coming up where they've got to go on the road. Can they go on the road and play the way they are at home? But that was a game that showed me something about their offense, because I don't like Maryland's offense a whole lot, but Maryland's defense this year has been pretty decent so far this year, and they moved the ball on them pretty effectively in that game, Trevor. And I mean, they had 510 yards of offense they had against them. Maryland, prior to that game, Michigan State had 484. They held Villanova to 231, Virginia to 370, UConn to 310. They're not an elite defense, but that's a scrappy defense. And Indiana ripped them up pretty good. So, yes, they've got to show that they can do it now on the road, but Indiana showed me that they're going to be a scrappy team at home. And the fact is, Nebraska has to go to Bloomington to play them. And the more they win, the more confident they're going to get. I'll tell you what, right now, too, if they beat Northwestern this weekend on the road, they get a bye before Nebraska. And then after that, it's Washington and at Michigan State before Michigan comes to town. I'm not betting on it, but after the way that they played last week and the way they destroyed UCLA, and that was a huge win, and UCLA stinks, but UCLA was a whole lot more competitive against LSU and Oregon than they were Indiana.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Fair enough.
And I'm starting to become a believer in what Kurt Cignetti's doing there, man, because it's now 5 games in, teams are getting film on it, and they still can't stop that offense. They've scored 77, 42, 52, and 44 points in the last 4 games. That's pretty good. I'm on board. I'm on board with the Hoosiers, man. And I think that's where preseason-wise, that's one game for sure that I had Nebraska winning preseason that right now I don't know that I have them winning.
Yeah.
And that flips it, because I had them about an 8 to 9 win team, and they already lost one game I had them winning. Mm-hmm. And this is another game that I had them winning that I think they could lose now against Indiana. So, yeah.
I agree. Yeah. In short, Irish English, I'm definitely buying Nebraska under 8.5 wins, just due to they have a gauntlet of an away schedule, and going to be interested to see how they handle some of those games. Iowa, as of right now, is the only unranked away game that they have. So going to be interesting to see what they do there.
And they're unranked. Iowa's unranked for now. Mm-hmm. I mean, Iowa still only has the one loss this year, correct?
Yep.
And that was to Iowa State by a point in a game they really led. Now, I think they're going to get a second loss this weekend, right, against Ohio State. But then after that, they get Washington at home, at Michigan State, home against Northwestern, home against Wisconsin, at UCLA, at Maryland. All those games are winnable. All those games are winnable. And by that point in time, a 2-loss Iowa team is without question in the top 25.
Yep, 100%.
If for no other reason than to boost the resumes for a team or two ahead of them. Because the committee will do that. I think committee's pretty fair when it comes like in their top 4, but they'll move some teams around 15 to 25 to try to, pad the resume for a team that they think is that good to make their case. Sure. I think they do. I don't have evidence of that, but just like, okay, that's a weird ranking. Where'd that come from? Oh, they bumped this team up 2 spots. That would explain why that team randomly jumped back in the top 25 this past weekend. Yeah. There's always a correlation.
Last one from Irish English. Army-Navy will have playoff implications.
I mean, I would love to buy it just because it'd be a great story. If you look at it just from a college football standpoint, but if you look at it from a Notre Dame standpoint, if either of those teams have playoff implications, then there's a good chance one of them beat Notre Dame. And if they've both lost to Notre Dame, I don't see a scenario in which they are in that conversation. I think they'll be behind another team that's done. That's my thing, is if they both lose to Notre Dame and Army plays Notre Dame in November, Navy plays them in late October. If you look at Army or Navy, so they're 4-0 right now. I think Navy probably has the best case right now, Trevor, based on who they've beaten, because they beat Memphis, who's another team contending for that league, and they're in the AAC, which is the most respected right now, in my opinion, Group of 5 league, along with, the Mountain West, kind of, but the Mountain West is having a tough time. But those are really the two big leagues that people look at in the Group of 5. They're in that league. If they beat Air Force on the road this weekend, they've got a bye week. Then they've got Charlotte. Then they play Notre Dame. So let's say they win their next two and they're 6-1 coming out of Notre Dame. I don't know that playing at Rice, at South Florida, home against Tulane, and at East Carolina jumps them up to where they're the top Group of 5 team. You know what I mean? Because the thing is for Army, I mean, when you look at Army, Trevor, I mean, are they in the AAC this year? Actually, now that I think about it, did they get status for this year, or are they joining next year? They're in the AAC this year.
Yeah,
okay, I take that back. I thought they were moving in next year, so that's my bad. They're in the AAC now. So they're both in that league. But you look at Army's schedule, they play Tulsa, UAB, East Carolina, Air Force, North Texas, UTSA, and then Navy. If they lose to Notre Dame, their best win would be over Navy. I don't think that gets them in the college football playoff conversation if they lose to Notre Dame. The only way that could is if it's a really close game against Notre Dame. But as we've said, the committee values wins. And with Navy or with Army, I mean, what's their best win at that point in time? It would be Navy. Whereas if Navy wins out and only loses to Notre Dame, they say, hey, look, we played Notre Dame tough and we beat Memphis. Right? I mean, so that would make it really fascinating, really fascinating. So, you know what? Now to say it, one of them could be in that conversation, even with a loss to Notre Dame. Now that they're both in the AAC, because again, I knew Army was joining. I thought it was next year. I'm going to say yes. I don't think that it will, if I had to pick right now. But you know what? I just talked myself into buying that one. And you know what? I'm going to be honest, Trevor. In the back of my mind, I think part of it is, I think that's good for Notre Dame. If one of those two teams is 10-1 going into that game, actually they'd be 11-1 because they would have played in the AAC champ. Actually, you know what, Trevor? It may not have playoff implications because it's the 5 highest ranked conference champs, right? No, it will, because even if they win the AAC, there could be a Mountain West team ranked up there. So, yeah, I was going to say they might have already locked it up by winning the AAC the week before, because those teams could – here's what's crazy. There's a scenario in which they're playing each other back-to-back weekends.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of nuts? I just realized that. Because now that they're both in the AAC, there's a chance that if they're both undefeated going in, and I'm curious how that's going to work. How the AAC could pick one of those two teams if they haven't played enough games. That's crazy to think about. Really crazy to think about. So that's really weird. And I promise you that they'll both get a loss if that happens. There's no way one of those teams, in my opinion, there's no way one of those teams wins back-to-back games over the other. No way.
Agreed. I agree with that 100%. Real quick, Irish English, I saw that you put in the chat. Yes, we did address the Florida State question. Brian and I both took the under 3.5, just based on their schedule, and the product that they're putting out on the field right now is definitely not great. For the Army-Navy question, full transparency, I misread it when I first looked at it, and I thought he was saying Notre Dame versus Army and Notre Dame versus Navy will have playoff implications. So
gotcha. Which based on reading it correctly, that actually will be true.
Yeah.
If this ends up being factual, that game has playoff implications, then yes, it would be having it would have an impact on Notre Dame. Now, here's my question, Trevor. When is the committee normally makes their decision the weekend after the weekend of the conference championship games? So what do they do with those two teams? Like, I know that they've talked about it, but does anyone in the chat know this? I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Does anybody know? Does anybody know what they would do if one of those two teams is there? That would be interesting. Something to look into. So yeah, and Irish English, man. How could you step out for your own question, man? I mean, you got the first buy sell hold in. You saw on the board. You know the order we go in. But yeah, we got to that. So in any rate, that's an interesting one, Trevor. We'd have a couple super chats kind of pop up here. And Bill's second one says, my question is more of an I'm in or I'm out, disregard and take the money, LMAO. We'll still do it, man. You gave us $10. We're still gonna talk about it. So you're good, man.
Yeah, 100%. Super chat from Bill Shepard. Thank you, Bill. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame gets a lot of the issues taken care of in the bye week, following somewhat of a Freeman-era trend after a bye, and destroys Stanford, setting up the momentum for the remainder of the season.
I buy that. Yeah. I mean, Bill, that's a buy, sell, hold submission. So
yeah,
I know that we in, we out's kind of the same thing as buy, sell, hold, as far as how the submissions need to be put in there. But yeah, I buy that. That's a good buy, sell, hold submission. So they get a lot of issues taken care of in the bye week. I'm hope buying that one. We'll see. But if they come out and blow out Stanford, it'll make me feel like they're close. But if they then play well again the next week against Georgia Tech, I'll know that they've got some stuff fixed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I am rooting hard for Army and Navy to both keep winning. I want them to both keep winning, and I want them both to be ranked, because the thing that my biggest fear is that those two teams are dangerous, and if they have a couple losses under their belt, maybe Notre Dame overlooks them. But if they're both unranked when they play Notre Dame, there's no way Notre Dame overlooks those teams, which I think would be a huge thing for Notre Dame. So good one, Bill. So yeah, we got that in there, man. I'm glad that glad you put that in there. Appreciate that. This is just Indy Milton fan has some Brian Kelly issues, which I can't blame him for. He just says, thank you for super chat, my man. He just says, buy, so hold, BK excuses. I buy that Brian Kelly likes to make a lot of excuses, but I sell all of his excuses. So how about that one, Trevor? I buy that he makes them. I sell the ones he makes.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
How's that work for you, my friend? Dig that one?
That
so we've never had that conversation, Trevor. You and I should have that conversation one of these days. I'm curious to get your thoughts on old Brian Kelly.
Oh, well, we'll go out to a nice dinner and we'll talk all about
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All righty. Buy, sell, hold. Era stop the rain. Love and Price would do well with the old USC student body left or right plays.
Well, buy. I mean, they're already kind of doing that. I mean, Jeremiah Love scored, I think his first touchdown against Purdue was in an old school. I mean, student body right was basically, if I remember correctly, just counter Trey, right? I mean, essentially. So, yeah, they would do very well with that. Very well with that. No question. It's right up their wheelhouse.
Yeah, buying that for sure. Getting Love and Price out on the perimeter would be great. They've done it, Brian, to your point, a couple times this year. You said against Purdue, which I think you're right. I think, was it Jeremiah Love's first touchdown of the game against Purdue when he got the edge and
bounced it? Yeah, it was first one, the 48-yarder.
Okay. All right. Yeah, buying that as well.
That was a counter. That was a counter Trey.
Buy, sell, hold. DC LTJ.
This is supposed to be if I can actually. That's my bad. I cut off the I. Whoops.
No,
my bad.
If matched up against Alabama, this Notre Dame team will lose by at least 20 points.
Sell. I mean, look. Georgia played much better against Alabama than they did against Kentucky. Again, these things are about matchups and which version of these teams will we play? What will they look like when these two teams play? So I mean, look, Alabama looked really good this weekend in the first half. They looked really bad. Like, let's be honest. If Notre Dame would have had, let's say Notre Dame would have played a good team and they would have jumped up 28-0 and then almost blown it. Let's be real. If Notre Dame was in the same shoes as Bama and they played Georgia at home and jumped out to a 28-0 lead and almost blew it, half the people praising Alabama for how good they look would be bitching in our chat about how, I can't believe you blew a game like that. When you play Texas in the playoffs, you're not going to be able to do that against them. Like, that's how it would go. right? So I'm not saying UDC, but that's how it would go. So, I mean, Bama right now is really good. By the time they have to play Notre Dame, I have no clue how those teams will look. Right now, would I pick Alabama to win? Absolutely. Right now, I'd pick Alabama to win. Would it be by 20? No, because I think Notre Dame can score some on Alabama. I think Bama can be run on. And I don't think they're going to be able to score enough to beat Notre Dame by 20. If Notre Dame scores 14 points against Bama, I don't see Bama scoring 30 more by 34, right? I just don't. So Notre Dame doesn't have to score that much to make it to where it'd be hard for them to be by 20. Now, would they win convincingly? That's possible. I mean, if Notre Dame's offense doesn't get a lot better, Notre Dame can't beat Alabama right now without their offense getting a lot better. Can we be honest about that? Right? But their defense makes that a game, in my opinion. It does. So I'm selling that.
I'm selling that as well. Notre Dame's defense is the strength of the team. Somebody put it in the chat. I saw it. It'd be strength on strength. Alabama's offense is awesome. Jalen Milroe is crazy. He looks fantastic right now. He's my lead to win the Heisman. I know the Boise State running back is also having a freak of the season, but Alabama's offense looks fantastic. But Notre Dame, at their core of the defense, I really don't think that this defense would allow the team to lose by 20 points. Now, a convincing win for Alabama right now, like if they played on Saturday, yeah, I think Alabama beats Notre Dame convincingly, but I don't think that's by 20 points. I really don't. So, yeah, for this one, I'm selling. Buy, sell, hold, AFMOS. Notre Dame comes out of the bye week, clear eyes, rested bodies, and a renewed spirit, blowing Stanford out of the water by 3 touchdowns. Cue the Top Gun Kenny Loggins Danger Zone music for the offense's highlight reel as they have 3 passing touchdowns on the day.
What's your take on that one, Trevor?
For the first part, I'm buying it. I do believe Notre Dame is going to come out of the bye week well-rested, renewed spirits, kind of battled through the adversity through the first 5 games of the year. 3 touchdowns. I'm going to hold on that. I think Notre Dame has the ability to beat Stanford by 3 touchdowns, especially 3 passing touchdowns on the day. I'm going to hold on just by their style of play on offense. I'm definitely going to buy the Top Gun Kenny Loggins Danger Zone music because that would be fantastic to watch in a highlight reel. So I'm buying that regardless. I love that. But I'm buying the first part, buying Top Gun Kenny Loggins, and I'm putting a hold on the 3 touchdowns because Stanford is a better football team than what it was last year.
Yeah. Their pass defense is still a mess, though.
Mm-hmm.
Their pass defense is still not very good. But they are much better coach and much more, they're a tougher physically tougher football team than they were a year ago. But they still lack talent.
Yeah.
And but here's the question though, Trevor, is how motivated is Notre Dame going to be in that football game? That's the question, and always will be the question about this Notre Dame football team, is what version of Notre Dame are we getting? And that's the answer we don't know. And if they come out motivated, then they're going to be pretty good. Now, here's the crazy thing. Stanford's run defense so far this year has actually been pretty good. They held Cal Poly to 25. They held Syracuse to 26. They held TCU to only 104 and 3.1. Now, Clemson did get 150 yards, but Clemson only averaged 5 yards carry. They had 30 carries in that game. And so, yeah. Like their run defense is pretty good. So if you think you're just going to come out and run on them the way when you talk about them being improved, Trevor, there's no area where they're more improved than their run defense because their run defense was garbage last year.
Oh, yeah.
Like garbage. They had that weird game against Washington State. And outside of that in Hawaii, they were bad. They gave up over 150 rushing yards last year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. They gave up over 200 yards rushing last year 4 times, including 381 to Notre Dame. This year, their high is 150 yards against Clemson. So, yep. So, I'm I'm going to buy that because I think that you're going to see Notre Dame have some different red zone wrinkles coming that game. And that's more of a hope buy than anything else, Trevor, to be completely
Sure.
honest with you. I make those from time to time where I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm hopeful it is, so I'm going to buy it.
Eye on the ball, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame is redshirting Sean Sevillano for 2024.
Well, for now, yes, I buy that because he's not in the depth chart. He hasn't earned a spot in the depth chart, and I'll dive into more. I'll have followed up later, so I'll just say buy that as of right now. They're redshirting Sean Sevillano, and then I'll have some follow ups to why and how that might change based on the next two that he has.
Yeah, I'll buy that for just what the situation has been so far to this season.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't go into the game, any game,
Right.
they absolutely should redshirt him, which follows into eye on the ball's next buy, sell, hold. Sean Sevillano should be given a chance to play if he is not injured.
Yeah. Buy, but he already is. And that's kind of, well, just let's go to, I'll buy it for now. Let's go to the next one because I think these all kind of tie in together. So let's go to the next one.
Last one, eye on the ball, buy, sell, hold. Given the number of injuries, Notre Dame should not be redshirting healthy talent.
Okay, so I'm going to sell that because healthy talent isn't always ready to play. And at the end of the day, you still have to make sure that you're doing right by all your players.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got a guy that you plan on redshirting and he's not ready to really help you, and you guys have had those conversations, I'm not always a fan of, hey, man, we need you. There's other guys. Hey, you've got Devin Houston. You've got Brendan Vernon. You've got guys can help you. You're going to be getting Gabriel Rubio back soon. And the issues that Notre Dame's had injury-wise are more of at defensive end, and he's not helping you at all at defensive end. He's 330 pounds.
Right.
So I'll sell that because it's different for every kid, and it's unique for every kid. The second part of it is Sean Sevillano is being given a chance to play. If Sean Sevillano was good enough to be in the 2 deep right now and had forced his way into the rotation, he'd be playing right now. He's not like ready to help them, and they're just choosing not to. In their eyes, whether that's Al Golden or Al Washington or all of them, I don't know who's making the ultimate decision. They don't think he's ready to help them right now. If he was, he'd play. They have no issue playing young. I mean, Logan Thomas has been playing for Notre Dame from day one. He's been a starter on special teams since the opener. And he's a guy that originally was being talked about redshirt, but you know why they're playing him? Because it's like this kid's too good not to play. Same thing with Kennedy Urlacher. Part of the reason he's playing more at safety is because he'd earned a starting spot on special teams, which we talked about when Notre Dame landed him. I was like, this kid's, you're going to want to redshirt Kennedy Urlacher, but he's going to make it impossible because he's going to be too good to not have on special teams.
Yeah.
And who recovered that fumble against Louisville this past weekend? Kennedy Urlacher, right? I mean, Logan Thomas has almost blocked a kick already, a punt already. Mm-hmm. So if Sean Sevillano if they felt he was ready to help them, he would help them. And if in week 7 he proves himself ready to play, they will play him and he'll help them. So it's not like they've purposely kept him out when he otherwise would be able to play. And now injuries have forced him into he just hasn't been in the position to do that, which is why because here's the thing. Like, did he get in? Let me go look at something real quick, Trevor. And because I'm not sure the answer to this question. Let me just look at something here real quick. Because I don't know if he did he play against Purdue? Let me find that real quick and see if he did not get on the field against Purdue. So either A, he's injured, or B, he's not ready yet, because you can play 4 games and still get a red shirt.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my answer to that one. That's my answer to that one.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Just because a player is talented does not mean that they're ready to step on the field and perform at a high level. And that's no knock on a player's talent, but I'm a firm believer that a fast track to get a player injured is putting him into a situation where he's not comfortable playing. So right. I would sell the third piece of this just from you don't want to make the injury problem worse by putting somebody out there that's not ready. And this isn't just specific to Sean Sevillano. It's just anybody across the board on the team. If they're not ready to go out and perform at a high level against, other Power 5 opponents, don't risk them getting hurt if they're out there and they're not fully comfortable with what they're able to do yet. So, yeah, I'm selling the third part. Buy, sell, hold. Little guy 131. Notre Dame will have at least 2 freshman All-Americans when the season is over.
I'll buy that. I mean, I bought it in the past when it was 3. So yeah, I'll buy that. I mean, I think Kingston's in that conversation already. I mean, that's almost a lock.
Yeah.
We'll see how much more Leonard Moore has to play between now and the end of the season. Anthony Knapp still has plenty of time to get his season turned around. And Bryce Young's still going to make a lot of plays. And I'm a lot of these freshman All-American lists. I don't know why, but like, if they like, I had this conversation with a guy who does one of these, and he's like, well, I didn't pick Blake Fisher because Blake Fisher's listed as a sophomore. I said, I know, but he's considered a redshirt freshman eligibility wise. Some of these, maybe they start looking at that or not. You know what I mean? So yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. So, yeah, I'll buy that. Between Knapp, between KVA, between Leonard Moore, and heck, with all the injuries, I mean, for all we know, Logan Thomas could end up getting 5 sacks at the end of the thing. Who'd you say?
I was going to say Bryce Young could be in that with all the
Bryce
injuries.
Young's another one
too.
Yeah, and if they start looking at Notre Dame's, sophomores with redshirt freshman eligibility, then that adds more to the list.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah, buying it as well. ND bet, buy, sell, hold. There will be big changes on the 2 deep on both lines heading into Stanford.
Sell big changes. Like there might be a change or 2, but I don't see big changes, unfortunately. And I don't count a guy being hurt and not on the depth chart as a big change. I mean, that's just it had to happen because the guy's not playing. So I'll sell that one. I wouldn't be opposed to that being true, but I don't think it will be true. We'll have to see.
Not much more to add there. Yep, I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold. Irish Catholic. Notre Dame heads to Los Angeles 10-1. You had them losing 1 hiccup game before USC, and we are still right on track for that. The shock just came way earlier and shockier than we thought.
That's my thing, Trevor, is like I said before the year, I have them going 11-1. Who are they going to lose to? I don't know. And I did this thing, and it's actually a really fun group, but it was actually right in the middle when Rita was sick and we thought we were going to lose her. And it was like, my wife was like, no, you need to go do this. You committed to it. And I'm really glad I did because I had such a great time. And it's a great group of guys, but they do this thing where you've got to make predictions and they have me do it. And so you got to predict their record. You got to predict, what they're going to do in the postseason. And then they asked the question, will they beat Florida State? Yes or no? Will they beat A&M? Yes or no? Will they beat Florida State? Yes or no? Will they beat USC? Yes or no? And I picked 11-1 and I answered yes on all 3 of those. And they're like, hold on a second. If you have them winning all their 3 of these, I said, I don't know who they're going to lose to, but I don't think it's going to be one of the top teams on their schedule. All year I've had some weird feeling about, maybe it's Georgia Tech, maybe it's UVA, something like that. It wasn't going to be one of the top teams. I had no thought that it would be Northern Illinois. Like no thought at all that it'd be Northern Illinois. I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like, no, I could see even maybe a Northern. No, I did not see that happening. I thought it'd be more something like a Georgia Tech, UVA, maybe even one of the service academies. I didn't see Northern Illinois coming, but I thought it was going to be a game like that. I did not think they were going to lose one of the big games. I've said this all year. I did not think they were going to lose one of the big games. I thought it'd be something else. Clemson in 2017 losing to 4-8 Syracuse. Clemson in 2016 losing at home in November to Pitt, who went like 8-5 that year. I thought it'd be something like that, not this. So yeah, I mean, I buy that. I buy everything he said. I buy that. It fits in line with what I thought this team would be. Now, this team hasn't been this is a different team than I thought it was going to be. If for no other reason than the fact that you're down 3 starting offensive linemen from where I thought they were going to have at the beginning of the season. So that does play into things a little bit, in my opinion. That does play. And just so the conversation, Drake, USMA is correct. Drake Bowen started on special teams last year all season. He is not a redshirt freshman. He is a true sophomore with true sophomore eligibility. So he is not eligible for any freshman All-American lists that are redshirt freshmen. Jaden Alsbury is, but Drake Bowen is not. He played all year last year.
Buy, sell, hold. Sing Kevin. This weekend, Riley Leonard doesn't have a single turnover. Jadarian Price has 0 fumbles, and Notre Dame suffers no further injuries.
I see what he did there.
Yeah.
I see what he did there. I think I think there's a little sarcasm there, Kevin. Yes, I will buy that. I think his question was a little bit sorry. Yes. The turnover thing, I kind of think that's a little bit of an unnecessary shot because Riley Leonard has not turned the ball over much this year. I think he's lost 2 games where he's had a turnover, right? He had the two picks against Northern Illinois, right? And that's the only interceptions he's thrown all year. And then he lost the fumble against Miami of Ohio, and that's it. I mean, he's got 3 turnovers in 5 games. That's actually pretty good. If a quarterback averages 1 turnover a game on the season, that's solid. If you're averaging less than that, and he's actually on pace. Actually, let's do this. He's got 3 turnovers in 5 games. So he's on pace over the course of an entire season to have 7 turnovers, guys. That's it. Yes, I know that they were bad, but to kind of hint that like he's having this big turnover problem is unfair and not accurate at all. So there's a lot of things you can complain about Riley Leonard. And yes, he had the bad turnovers against Northern Illinois, but turning the ball over has not been at the top of the list of things that I would want to fix and correct with Riley. If anything, I'd like to see him take a few more chances that may end up leading to turnovers. I think he's too conservative right now as a thrower. He's not willing to take some chances and some shots that he took at Duke. So, and again, Jadarian Price has had 1 fumble in his career, I think, last 2 years. Do you remember him fumbling any other games?
No,
I don't.
I don't.
So, yeah, I'm gonna buy that because this weekend all those things are gonna happen.
I was about to say, as far as the buy, sell, hold is confirmed, I do buy that. You are correct.
Yep.
Buy, sell, hold, Bayside Tiger 6. Xavier Watts won't have the same stats as last year, but has improved his overall game so far this season.
So let's look at Xavier right now. I had made this prediction before the season. So based on what he did before the season, I would say that that's an accurate statement. But right now, Xavier Watts has 18 tackles on the season. So he's played 5 games. So if you look at over the course of the season, he's on pace for 47 tackles. Last year, he made 52. I think that's going to get upped when they play a service academy. That per game average is going to change a little bit, but we'll see. He's got 2 interceptions in 5 games, so he's on pace for 5 interceptions. Okay, so that's obviously less than last year. But he is on pace for 13 pass breakups, which is more than what he had last year. So even though he's on pace for fewer interceptions than he did last year, he's actually on pace for more total passes defense, Trevor. Now, so people don't understand, pass breakups are literally you broke up a pass. An interception, we know a pass defense is either an INT or a pass breakup. And right now, Xavier has 7 pass breakups in 5 games. If you project that over a 13-game season, he's going to have 18 passes defensed. Last year, Trevor, he had 11. So his numbers are, for the most part, his tackle numbers are pretty much on par with last year. And I think once they play a service academy, they'll go up. He's just not going to have as many interceptions, but his total production on the ball is actually on pace to be significantly higher this year than it was last year, which is impressive because I didn't think people were going to throw at him enough. So I'm actually going to sell that because I actually think his stats are going to end up overall being improved, but I'm going to buy the second part because I also think he's a better overall player. So I do think the premise of what you're saying is correct. I think Xavier Watts is a much better football player this year than he was last year at this same time in the season. But I still think his stats are going to end up being a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, Brian. I was working on an article that I'd send over to you, and one thing that I learned doing some research is Notre Dame is second in the country in passes defensed. The only team that they're behind right now is Alabama. I think they have 34 passes defense, which is honestly, I think that puts them at a higher pace than what it was in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, when I went back and looked, which is impressive considering they lost Cam Hart to the draft. Jaden Mickey is no longer with the team.
Well, Trevor, just to your point, the pace they're on now, they had 64 last year, or 64 last year. In 13 games.
Yeah.
They're on pace for passes defense for 68 in the regular season.
Yeah.
So if you count what they're doing per game and you add the 13th game in there, they're on pace for 88.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not correct. That can't be correct. 34 times 5, actually 5, and then you
No,
do
they'd be
13.
more. Yeah.
That's 88. Hold on. So 6.8 per game times 13 games. That's 88. That's over 20 more than last year. Because I'm sitting, you know what it is? I'm thinking 6 times 2 gets them to 68 at the end of the regular season. That's actually wrong. The number that actually by the end of the regular season, I don't know why I was thinking half the games are done. They would be at 82 by the end of the regular season. So way more disruptive on the football. And then last year, Trevor, to your point, Notre Dame last year had 16 interceptions. Right now, I believe they have 7.
7.
And so interceptions wise, they're on pace over the course of the season for 18 interceptions. Last year, as good as Notre Dame was last year, they had 16. So they're upping it in both areas, interceptions and pass breakups. It's not like their interceptions are going way down and they're going way up on both. And Christian Gray is about 2 drop picks away from them having 9 interceptions right now. But this secondary has been even better than I expected it to be so far.
Yep. I'm in the same boat. Buy, sell, hold again from Bayside Tiger 6. Drake Bowen and or Adon Schuler will be captains as juniors.
Buy. I'll actually be somewhat surprised if one of those 2 kids is not a captain, if not both of them next year. Buy.
For sure.
Yep.
Buy, sell, hold. Vince's sweater sewing
I didn't even notice this when I put it into I copied this and put it in there, and I didn't even notice that it said that. Sorry.
Oh, that's good. The Georgia-Alabama game was an indictment of the defenses as opposed to the coronation of elite offenses.
Oh, I kind of buy that. I don't think either defense played worth a darn.
No.
To be honest with you. But you also can't dismiss some of the crazy plays. Like, I don't know what you could have done as a Georgia DB on that last touchdown from Ryan Williams. That was just an insane play. It just was a phenomenal play. And at the end of the day, Bama won that game with a defensive play. I mean, they intercepted that ball in the end zone. So, no, neither of them have played. No, neither of them played very well on defense. I think Bama's defense got into hey, we got a big lead, so let's take our foot off the gas. I thought Bama's defense early in that game was overwhelming Georgia a little bit. So, but they just couldn't put them away. I thought it was more of an indictment of Georgia's defense than anything. And I think Georgia started moving the ball when Alabama got in kind of, let's get out of our same focus that we had. I think it had more to do with that, Trevor. So, but overall, I buy the submission. But I don't want to buy it hardcore because sometimes great offense can make, really good defenses look bad. Sure. Or elite offenses can do that. But overall, I buy that premise. What say you, Trevor? I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one.
I'm relatively in the same boat as you. I think it was just 2 really good offenses, tale of 2 halves. I think moral of the story is Alabama learned the hard way that a 21-point lead is not safe when you're playing a high caliber team like Georgia. But I think you hit the nail on the head. There were some plays that were made in that game by both receivers. I mean, Georgia's go-ahead touchdown right before Alabama's go-ahead touchdown was another really good play after the catch by that Georgia wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like that same conversation that we were having at the Louisville postgame show. Is Louisville's wide receivers made some plays, but they were just great plays.
Yeah.
By those wide receivers. It's not like Notre Dame was out of coverage and Leonard Moore's a true freshman, but it's not like he played Ja'Cory Brooks bad on that touchdown. It was a really good ball and a really good catch. And that's just what college football has evolved to now, when you can have a really good defense, but skill wise, wide receivers are just that good now. So
yeah.
I
still say that even though I buy it, I still say that Alabama's defense would have had a much better showing against Georgia if that game was closer early. Because when you're in a game like that, once a team like that gets that kind of crazy momentum and you've had to change your mindset from what it was at the beginning to the middle and the end again, it is hard to get your mind back to where it was early. It just is. That's just not how football works. People are, just ramp it back up. It doesn't work like that. It rarely works like that, Trevor. Once you let that team back in and you've changed your mindset from where it was at the start, you just can't flip that switch back on, man. And that's why I say Alabama's defense, Georgia's defense sucked the whole game. Alabama's defense sucked for a half after they got their minds out of where they were before. But I'm just going to remind people, when everybody talked to me and I got people like giving me a hard time because I was saying that Georgia's secondary was not that good, and I pointed to the Clemson game. And they're like, well, hold on a second. Clemson didn't score, blah. I said, yes, but if you look at that game, Clemson's receivers were beating Georgia's corners all freaking game. But the quarterback couldn't get him the football. It's like I think it reminded me of back in 2009, Trevor, when Notre Dame blew out Nevada. And I went on the message board and I was that guy. I said, guys, that was not the win you think it was. Because Nevada dropped like 10 balls. They had guys open, but Kaepernick couldn't hit them. And I'm like, this defense has got problems. Well, you're just a hater. And look what happened the rest of the year. That defense was garbage, but Nevada couldn't take advantage of it. And that's what I saw when I watched that game, is that secondary can be exposed by a good passing offense. And they absolutely were on Saturday. They absolutely were. And if you'd have had a better, if Cade Klubnik would have played against Georgia like he did the games after Georgia might still have won that game, but it was going to be a very close game because Clemson would have scored on them.
Sure.
And that secondary, and maybe they get better, but they did not impress me. They did not impress me at all against Clemson. That was more about Clemson just not being able to read a defense and make a good throw. There was one play where I think they might have picked it off, and it was a throw to Adam Fuller. And if you're just watching on TV, it looks like the guy was on Adam Fuller and he knocks the ball up in the air, and Adam Randall, excuse me, and they pick it off. But I'm like, when you look at the all-22, Adam Randall had that guy smoked. And if you just lead him, it's a 60-something, 70-yard touchdown. But on TV, it looks like, oh, it was a close play and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, nope, that secondary is a problem. And they've got and now Malachi Starks is a great player, but as a whole, that secondary right now is not great. They may turn it around, but as of right now, that's a problem. So I buy it a lot more for Georgia than I do the other. We have another super chat here, Trevor.
Awesome. Super chat from ND Milton fan. Thank you. Without Riley Leonard mobility, Notre Dame already makes O-line changes. So that's actually, that's really interesting that you bring that up.
I'm going to buy that actually, Trevor. I think Riley Leonard's ability to escape the pressure gave them the okay to put run blockers in on the left side of the line, where they might have had to make some different decisions if you would have had a more – if Steve Angeli was starting quarterback, I think you'd be forced to go with a different offensive line alignment. Because somebody made this point the other day. Riley Leonard in 4.5 games has been sacked twice. Steve Angeli in a half of football has been sacked 3 times.
Yeah.
That's and I believe 2 of those sacks were with the first team offensive line in the game. Because he played 3 series with them. So, yeah. Yeah. No, I brought it up in yesterday's show and wrote about it a little bit in that article was that Notre Dame has given up 5 sacks on the season. 3 of them were to Steve Angeli. And Riley Leonard, mind you, taken into consideration, some of the dropbacks aren't recorded as passing attempts because he scrambles. But on a minimum 126 pass dropbacks, Riley Leonard has been sacked 5 times. Steve Angeli's dropped back to pass 11 times and has gotten sacked 3 times. So that, if it's a buy-sell hold, I do buy that, because I think statistically the offensive line would not be performing as well as it is on paper if Notre Dame didn't have a mobile quarterback who was able to go and break out of a sack and make a play outside of the pocket. So, yeah, I would buy that. Absolutely. I also want to say that I buy this comment here in the chat from Stephen B. Great questions today. Totally buy that one. Totally buy that one. You guys are 100%. On fire today. Great stuff. Somebody said it earlier. Only at Irish Breakdown can a question about Nebraska turn into a segment and a rant on Indiana. And I was like, well, it was relevant and it led down. It makes sense, but you are correct, man. We have some fun here.
Christopher Crosby, buy, sell, hold. Couple in here. Texas A&M will beat Missouri this weekend.
Buy. I've not been impressed with Missouri all season. I really have not. I guess part of that could be confirmation bias, Trevor, because I didn't think Missouri was going to be that good coming in the season. I like what Eli Drinkwitz is doing, but teams like Missouri have a lot harder time replacing the amount of talent that they had to replace last year on their defense and their offensive line and at running back. And I know they brought back really good receivers, but I've watched that team play, and honestly, they should have lost to Boston College and they should have lost to Vanderbilt. And like you look at their numbers, like, hey, they're averaging 36.5 points per game and they're only giving up 12. And I'm like, yeah, that's because they beat Murray State and Buffalo by combined 89-0. Their last two games at home against Boston College and Vanderbilt, they've won by a combined score of 57-48. They won by 6 and won by 3. So, yeah, and Vanderbilt should have beat them. I mean, Vanderbilt flat out should have beat them last week in Missouri. And Texas A&M's not world beaters, but they're playing quality football right now, in my opinion. Had a nice win over Arkansas last week. I just don't know. The only question is if it gets into a game where it becomes a scoring game, then Missouri will win, because Texas A&M's offense right now is pretty mediocre because of some of the issues. And we have a bias hold about that, so I don't want to get into that just yet. But I'm going to buy that. We're going to do a prediction on this game for Irish Breakdown. And then, of course, Bill Bender and I will do that tomorrow, because he and I are still going to have our segment tomorrow. Even though we're not doing predictions for Notre Dame games, Bill and I are still going to have our prediction show tomorrow. But I have Texas A&M winning that game. I do.
Yeah, I'll buy that as well. Another factor is the game is at Kyle Field, and Texas A&M is just a team that I will never count out when they are at home, if I'm just being 100% honest. I'm sure Nick Saban would be one of the first people to tell you that. I'm not saying that Missouri
he did
is like
actually
what
tell
Alabama
us that.
Is, but he did.
Remember, Trevor? He did tell us that. That's why he picked A&M to beat Notre Dame.
Sure
My
did.
response to the legendary Nick Saban was, just because you can't beat Texas A&M at their place doesn't mean Marcus Freeman can't. So had some fun with that one. But he is right, though. Overall, that is a tough place to play. Mm-hmm. If it's a good A&M team, it's a really tough place to play.
Yep. 100%. Buy, sell, hold. Iowa will score 13 or less points against Ohio State.
I buy that. I mean, Iowa's scoring more points against some teams that aren't that good, Trevor, but I don't know that I buy that they're going to go out there and all of a sudden score a bunch against Ohio State. That's a really good Ohio State defense. It really is. And look, Iowa's improved on offense, Trevor. I mean, because here's the biggest thing. You know what Tim Lester has brought back to Iowa that Brian Ferentz removed from Iowa? The ability to run the football.
Yeah.
Like, it was so weird watching Iowa the last couple of years, because you're just like, dude, they can't run the ball. I mean, last year they averaged 115 yards a game. In 2022, they averaged 94 yards. Iowa averaged 94 rushing yards a game. 2021, they were 123. In 2020, they were 171. In 2019, they were 137. Right now, through 4 games, they're averaging 250 yards a game rushing. And they've gone for over 200 in every game. They went for 241 against Illinois State, 204 against Iowa State, who's ranked and undefeated, 284 against Troy. Old Jared Parker, my guy Jared Parker's having a bit of a rough time. And then this past weekend at Minnesota, they ran for 274 yards and they've averaged over 5.4. They've averaged 5.4 or more yards per carry in every game. They've been over 6 in 3 of their 4 games. Like, that's the biggest difference about this Iowa football team, is they can run the football. That's the big thing about them. They can run the football. And that's going to make them a dangerous team this year, Trevor, in my opinion. It's going to make them a very dangerous team. And if you look at that Minnesota game, they ran for 272 against Minnesota. A week later, Michigan only ran for 155. And North Carolina only went for 147. They held Rhode Island to 18, Nevada to 58. Like, Iowa went for 272 at Minnesota. Michigan only went for 155 at home against Minnesota. That's the difference. And so that's why I believe this game might actually be a little closer than people think, because I think Iowa can control the ball a little bit, but this is a this is a really good Ohio State defense.
Yeah.
And I'm watching people talk about how they didn't play very well against Marshall. And for them, they didn't play very well against Marshall. But look at the numbers. Their version of not playing well looks a lot different than a lot of other teams not playing. It's kind of like Notre Dame's defense, right? Like against Marshall, you're watching that game and you're like, man, they're not playing great against Marshall. They hold them to 3.8 yards per play and 264 yards of offense. And Jim, their D coordinator, was so pissed after that game about how his defense played. He didn't even give anybody a game ball. And you're like, you gave up 14 points and held him to 264 yards. But that's what he's doing, though. He's setting a standard. It's not about the yards. It's about, did we play to our potential? Did we play to our ability? That's what great coaches do. They don't say, well, we won by 35. We held them to 264 and only 3.8 yards per play. But it's like, I don't care. We didn't play to our potential. We didn't play Ohio State defense in that game. I don't care what the numbers say. And that's what great coaches do, Trevor, is it's about our standard. I don't care what the numbers say. I'm telling you we didn't play the way we should have played. Just because you got way more talent than Marshall and you overwhelmed them doesn't mean that I'm okay with you putting up great numbers. But it does speak volumes about how that's considered a quote-unquote bad performance for this defense, right? So I think Iowa's going to be able to, control the clock a little bit at times, but I think they're just going to have a hard time scoring on this Ohio State defense. This is an Ohio State defense that's only given up 27 points in 4 games. So I'm going to say yes. I'm going to buy that they'll score 13 or less, but I do think it'll be like the Michigan State game. I said it last week. I said it'll be competitive for like the first quarter and a half, and it was. And then Ohio State rolled, and I think the same thing is going to be true this weekend when they play Iowa. Now, if it was at Iowa, maybe a little different story, because that's an actual tough place to play.
Yeah,
but it's in Columbus, so I have the Buckeyes rolling in that one.
I'll buy that as well. Ohio State's defense is really good. I think one thing that would have made this interesting is to see if the buy-sell hold was tailored around how many points Ohio State was going to score, because this is by far the best defense that they will have played up to this point.
Yep.
But I do think it will be a closer game than what people are giving it credit for. I think Ohio State still wins convincingly. I don't know if Iowa breaks 13 points. It's just, this team is really good, man. This team's really good. Buy, sell, hold. Syracuse will hand UNLV their first loss of the season Friday night.
Buy. I like what Fran Brown's doing at Syracuse, and I know they've had a couple. Well, actually, they only had the one tough loss. They had that tough loss against Stanford. They should have won that game, and then they beat Georgia Tech, and they bounced back. You know what? He showed me something is the week after. Now again, it was Holy Cross, who's not that good, but they bounced back that next week and got a convincing win. I like what Fran Brown's doing there, and I think that they're going to go out to UNLV and beat UNLV. I'm not betting my mortgage on that, because that UNLV offense is still dynamic schematically, and Syracuse still has some personnel deficiencies on that defense. But I do think I'd predict a win for Syracuse. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not, even if I was a bettor, I'm not putting money on that game.
I'll buy that as well. I think even if it does, with UNLV's offense being as good of an offense as it is, I think Syracuse's offense is a team that can put points on the board. Kyle McCord's having a pretty decent season so far with Syracuse. I don't know how well they would fare in a shootout. We might find that out on Friday night, but I would buy that. I think Syracuse beats UNLV. Where is it? Brian, do you know where that game is at? Is it in Vegas?
It's at UNLV.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in Vegas. Yeah.
Okay. Buy, sell, hold. Greg Nielsen. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The cumulative effect of the season-ending injuries the Irish have suffered, primarily on the O and D line, has altered the potential ceiling on this season.
I would say that's a buy. I would buy that. I don't know that this team, I thought if this team clicked at the beginning, before the season started, they could compete for a championship. I don't think they can do that now. I don't think that this offensive line will be good enough to get into the quarterfinals and the semifinals or even the quarterfinals if you get an SEC or Big Ten champ and be good enough in the trenches. I don't. Defensive line a little bit more so than because you lost Boubacar and Patojo. That sucks, but you're getting Burnham back. Bryce Young's going to keep getting better. You're going to get Rubio back at some point in time. The offensive line is the driver for me. I think this season would look a whole lot different if Charles Jagasaw didn't get hurt and if Ashton Craig and Billy Schroth were still healthy. I think we'd be having a different conversation about what this offense looks like. I do. And I'll be honest, I did not think it was going to have that big of an impact. Like I thought it'd have an impact, but not this big of an impact. And it turns out that it has. It really has.
I will buy it for the offensive line. Defensive line, I'm leaning towards sell. But all of the injuries that have stacked up on the offensive line, I again, Brian, to your point, I did not think that the Charles Jagasaw injury was going to have this big of an impact on the offensive line. And unfortunately, it has. And Joe Rudolph and that offensive line are really going to have to step it up if they do want to try to compete for a deep playoff run this year, because the way it's playing right now, it's just there's no way. Defensive line, based on what you said, losing Vitello and Boubacar is tough, but getting Burnham back, getting Rubio back at some point, Bryce Young and Logan Thomas are starting to come into their own. You do still have
Junior has played really well in the 2 games. And I was not the big fan of how he played last year at all, but in the 2 games he's had to play, he's done really well.
Yep, I agree. You still have the veterans with Riley Mills and Howard Cross and RJ Oben in there. So, obviously their play has been very roller coaster-esque. But if there is a group where I do believe that they can start to turn it around because they do have that experience, it's those veteran guys. D-line, not as much as putting a halt to the ceiling. Offensive line, absolute buy, 100%. Buy, sell, hold, D-Troll Hunter. Vandy beats Bama. Baby roll, chaos roll. The Fighting Clark League gets DeBoer.
All right, so I love this. I love this buy, sell, hold from him because he and I have joked privately. It's like he makes all these kind of wild buy, sell, holds about things, and then they like almost all come true. It's like Florida State's going to be bad. And just he's done all these things about all this chaos type stuff, and like they almost all come true. So I'm going to sell this one because I think this is the most extreme version of what he has said. I don't think there's any chance that Vanderbilt beats Alabama, but the streak he is on right now with these buy, sell holds, I'm almost kind of intrigued by how this one's going to pan out, but I just don't. Look, I'll say this about Clark Lee's team, boy. They're not winning a bunch of games, right? I think, what are they, 2-2 right now? They are 2-2 right now. And losing it, they lost last second to Georgia State. They should have won that game, but they competed their butts off in Missouri. I just don't know that they have the ability and the athletes to play with Bama. Honestly, I don't think that's going to be overly close. But man, I hope your streak continues. Wouldn't that be the ultimate chaos? Week after Bama beats Georgia, they go out and lose at home or on the road to Vanderbilt. Wouldn't that be the ultimate chaos type of season?
Oh, it'd be nuts. I mean, looking at that game in a vacuum, if you just look at Alabama versus Vanderbilt, I'd probably no chance, but it is one of those stereotypical trap games that everybody talks about. You know what I mean? Alabama plays Vanderbilt, but it's very easy to look forward to playing Shane Beamer in South Carolina the week after. And then in order after that, they play at Tennessee, at home against Missouri, at LSU. So it would be a crazy story. I don't think they get it done. I could see it being a very competitive football game for at least the first half. But D-Troll, as much as I would love for that to be true, just to watch the college football world burn for a second, I just don't think it would. I don't think it'll happen. 13 reasons why. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will rise in the rankings without playing a game this weekend.
Oh, buy the heck out of that. Yeah, I mean, just for the one game earlier that we predicted, Trevor, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Because if A&M beats Missouri, that has a double impact for Notre Dame. Number one, you're going to jump ahead of Missouri because they lost and have not looked good recently. And then the other reason is because they're going to lose on a field that you've already gone and won on. So I think that's going to have an impact on this conversation as well. So, yeah, I think that alone is going to be that. And then there's a couple other games. Michigan plays at Washington this weekend. That's going to be a very intriguing game for me. USC plays at Minnesota this weekend. It's getting a little bit chilly here in the Midwest. You've got Ole Miss plays at South Carolina this weekend, and supposedly Lenore Sellers is going to be back. So, even though there's not a lot of great games as far as like ranked versus ranked teams, there are some very intriguing games where you could see maybe a team kind of getting upset a little bit this weekend, Trevor. And LSU's off. That's a team that's ranked ahead of them. Miami plays at Cal. Cal hasn't sucked this year, man. They blew that game against Florida State. They outplayed Florida State. They went on the road and beat Auburn. I don't predict it. I'd be shocked by it, but it's possible. It's possible. So there's certainly some games ahead of them where I could see some teams losing and falling behind Notre Dame. Now, of course, on the flip side, I could also see the committee going into a situation where, Clemson goes on the road and curb stomps Florida State and they decide to, jump them over Notre Dame and Missouri. I could see something like that. I could see something like where Iowa State beats Baylor this weekend and they're undefeated. So, you know what I mean? So, it could, but I think if Missouri loses to A&M, and that's the reason Notre Dame goes up, that those teams don't leap Notre Dame, because now all of a sudden Notre Dame's win over A&M looks even better.
Sure.
And that's going to be the key, especially if Louisville wins this weekend. So because Louisville plays SMU this weekend at home. If Louisville bounces back and wins this weekend over a 4-1 SMU team, that's a lot closer to being 5-0 than they are being worse than 4-1. Then all of a sudden it's gonna look really good. All of a sudden Notre Dame's, because at some point in time, not just Notre Dame fans, but the national media's got to look and say the NIU game was just a fluke. You know what I mean? Like, Notre Dame beat A&M. A&M's turned out to be a pretty darn good football team. Notre Dame beat Louisville in a game. They literally led almost the entire game. One possession. They trailed for one possession. That's it. Led for over 52 minutes, and then Louisville goes out and keeps winning. And, eventually you got to kind of say, you know what? That's just a really good team who just had a really bad day. Right now, I get why a lot of people aren't there yet. I totally get it. But as those teams win more, and Notre Dame, if Notre Dame keeps winning, and look, I know I've heard people say style points don't matter. Yeah, they do. Marcus Freeman, whether he likes it or not, has got to understand it's not just about beating Stanford. It's about dominating Stanford. It's not just about beating Georgia Tech. It's about dominating Georgia Tech. That's the world you've put yourself in by not having your football team ready to play against Northern Illinois, right? But the good news is Notre Dame's capable of doing that. And you know what I mean? So that's going to be the key. And we'll see if it happens. But yes, I do predict that they will move up in the rankings this week, because of earlier we bought the fact that Missouri's going to get beat by A&M. And I think Missouri will drop below. If Missouri doesn't drop below Notre Dame this weekend, if they lose to A&M, then I will flat out say you can never convince me again that the rankings aren't biased towards the SEC and against Notre Dame, because there's no way you can look at two teams with identical records, one and they have one common opponent that they played on the same exact field. Notre Dame won by 10. The other team lost. Notre Dame would have 2 top 25 wins. I don't believe Missouri has any top 25 wins right now, correct? Because they have beat Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vanderbilt. Boston College no longer ranked. So, I mean, there's no way you can justify having Missouri ahead of Notre Dame if they lose this weekend. But that's an if still right now.
Buy, sell, hold. BSAC 4ND. We lose at least 3 more players to the portal before it opens again.
Okay, can I comment on this? Because I've seen everybody talking about Tyson Ford entering the portal. And I even responded to a Louisville guy today because he used Tyson Ford's announcement that he's going in the portal as some attempt to be like, why are these kids jumping in the portal the season over? Tyson Ford's situation is way different. He was no longer on the team. He was put on medical redshirt this offseason. He's not even eligible. He is never allowed to play football at Notre Dame again. So lumping Tyson Ford in with those other is completely different. It's unfair to Tyson because he's not making a quote unquote selfish decision. Notre Dame put him on a medical hardship or medical scholarship. He still wants to play football. And the only option he has to play football is to go in the portal. Right? So it's a different deal. If they lose, at least if this is I'm selling, but if they do lose more, it will be because multiple players that are on medicals jump in. They didn't go buy or something like that. But I'm selling this right now. I'm selling this.
Yeah, I'm with you. Not much more to add there. I'm with you.
Yep. I just want to comment on something because there's still people doing this. When you talk about how Oregon State was a depleted defense, they'll say, well, Notre Dame was missing. Guys, Notre Dame lost Joe Walt and replaced him with a 5-star freshman. Notre Dame lost Audric Estime and replaced him with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. When Oregon State loses a starter, they're replacing him with someone who's not very good. You guys do. I know you know that. I know you know that, but you're trying to spin it. Beating Oregon State in a bowl game was a nice win for the team, but it doesn't tell you that because a quarterback played well in a bowl game that's irrelevant against a depleted defense, and all of a sudden he's a good football player. If he was, then the Notre Dame coaching staff would not have gone and gotten Riley Leonard. It's really that simple. It really is that simple. So you can spin it all you want because you don't like Riley Leonard. I get it. You don't like Riley Leonard. But clearly there's a lot of other people that are around this situation a lot more that don't think he's the answer in the future. That's just a fact. A fact.
Buy, sell, hold, older than dirt. We will see Mike Denbrock in the box and Gino Guidugli on the field in the next game. This will be the result of self-scouting this week, where Mike realizes he lost track of the nuances that made things work and forgot to add motion and eye candy to many of his play calls.
You know, I wouldn't be opposed to this. I mean, I'm going to sell it because I haven't heard anything about that, right? And no one's, but I would be totally fine with this. I don't necessarily. I'm going to keep my opinion of Gino Guidugli to myself for now. But I'll just say this: if I was Mike Denbrock, I'd be in a tough spot because part of me wants to be on the field so I can be there with the players, looking at the pads and explaining things to them. But the other part of it is I think it would be even more important for me to be able to be up top and see everything that's happening. I don't know that I would trust everything I'm being told about what's happening up top. So this is a really interesting submission by Older Than Dirt here, because I would think about that if I was Notre Dame. Trevor, what did we say on Tuesday? Everything is on the table for Notre Dame right now. Everything's on the table. Everything's on the table. And that includes what coaches do you have where during the game? Who's communicating to the player? I mean, all of that's got to be on the table. That's a very interesting one, man. Very interesting one.
Yeah, This one's got me thinking a little bit. This is a really good submission. I'm
sorry. Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah,
Based on what somebody in the chat just said, it's also starting to get a little bit cooler in South Bend. So it might be a good time for Mike Denbrock to make this decision before we get to November when it gets a little bit colder. So that might be a good time for coach to be like, you know what? I do think I need to be in the booth. Maybe he's walking around outside like I am this week, Trevor. And I don't know what it's like in Indiana, but it's been a little chilly in South Bend the last couple of days. That might be a good time. Hey, M. Kostra, man, that's hilarious. That made me laugh.
That's funny.
So very well done on that one. Very well done on that one, man. That's good stuff.
That's
Sorry,
good.
Trevor. I just saw that and I
No.
just started laughing. I had to talk about that one. But to your point, go back.
No, you're good. That's funny. That's really good. I mean, this is an interesting submission. I am a firm believer that I really like when offensive coordinators are up in the booth, because the way that a coordinator goes and dissects film is they look at the all 22 film and they look at things from that bird's eye view. And I think it would be a little bit more helpful. There might be things that he's not able to pick up on the sideline.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I understand that you have a system in place that is meant to, you have somebody relaying it down to you so you can then communicate that at an eye level, especially when you're putting in a new offense as a first-year offensive coordinator. But there are some things that he's missing. The part of this that is interesting to me is the final part. I think Notre Dame goes away from motion and things like that. I don't think it's because Mike Denbrock forgets. Mm-hmm. I can't believe that because he is a genius. I do think Mike Denbrock is one of the smarter minds in college football. I don't think him being at field level is why they're forgetting to use motion. I think it's a different issue, but I don't know what that is. So I'm going to buy the first part because I would like to see Mike Denbrock up in the booth, but I'm going to sell the second part because I don't think he's forgetting to use motion because he's on the field.
What I do think can happen on the field, Trevor, though, is you can get caught up into the emotional aspects of the game because you're around the players, you're talking to the players, you're communicating between series where you're not thinking as much big picture like you are up in the booth, right? So it's you're making a good point, but I look at it a little bit differently. How I view it, it's not that he lost track. It's just when you're on the field, you're talking to your quarterback, you're talking to your players, you're in the huddle talk. Whereas otherwise, if you're up in the booth, and this is why I kind of liked being up in the booth when I was a pass game coordinator and when I was sort of the eyes for our pass offense, is because I needed to be able to think, I needed to be calm, I needed to not have people in my ear and in front of me and this and that, and so I could kind of be there and see it. So that was my thing too. Plus, I mean, honestly, I didn't trust anybody else's eyes other than mine, and that's a me problem. And that's how I would be as a coordinator. Like, yeah, it's great. I've also wondered if pro-style offensive coordinators work as well on the field as air raid guys. Now, Chip Long was a little bit of a pro-style guy, and he was on the field, and that offense was pretty good. But I've always kind of felt like offenses like Denbrock's that have a lot of stuff, that it's kind of better to kind of be up in the booth. Because the other thing you can do up in the booth is you can kind of script your next series up there, where it's a little harder to do that when you're on the sideline because you're talking to people the whole time, and you're in a way where you can't just be talking to them while you're writing, where in the headset you can. So that's another thing that I think is an advantage. But at the end of the day, as I've always said, there's no right or wrong to that. It's what you're most comfortable with. I'm explaining the reasons why I liked being up in the booth more than I liked being on the field. When I was just a position coach, and that was my only job, I liked being on the field. Because I was down there, I was with but whenever I had any sort of bigger picture responsibilities, I liked being up in the booth. So, and Denbrock has been in the booth more than he's been on the field during his career. He's done both, but at Cincinnati and at LSU, he was always up in the box.
Yeah. Buy, sell, hold. Couple in here from BK Last Brain Cell. Notre Dame is behind schedule as a program from where they should be in head coach Marcus Freeman's third year.
Sell. I mean, are they where I think they could have been? No. But are they ahead? Are they behind schedule? Absolutely not. I mean, no, absolutely not. I mean, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this one, just other than saying I sell the heck out of that one. Because there's so many things going well. Recruiting's going great.
Yeah.
The defense is elite. There's a lot of things changing about Notre Dame for the better. So no, I would not say I would sell that. I would sell that.
Yeah, I'm selling it as well. Only thing here is just.
Go ahead, Trevor. No, go ahead.
The only thing that I was going to say, my advice here, don't get wrapped up into this year 3 hype about that's when every coach should be playing for their national championship. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different factors with Marcus Freeman being this is his first head coaching job, but I'm selling.
Here's the thing I'll say that I'm selling today on October 5th, October 2nd. But your opinion, and he's not necessarily saying this. I think this is just a submission to get us talking. That's what I like about this submission. I don't know that he necessarily would say, well, I think this. But if you're someone who does believe that, I could somewhat understand why you think that, because that Northern Illinois loss is still fresh in your mind. And if they're 11-1 at the end of the year, you probably wouldn't have that same feeling. But someone like me who's looking past the Northern Illinois, saying, yeah, that win sucked. There's no excuse for it. There's things that got to get fixed and be addressed. You don't just smooth it over because you have a win over Louisville now, right? You also can look bigger picture and see a lot of the good things that are happening. If they go drop 2 more games in the regular season, then my opinion changes. And I will say that they're behind schedule because there's no excuse for this football team, even with the injuries, to be more than a 1-2 loss team in the regular season. And 2 losses makes me not happy.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. But if they go 9-3, then now we're having a different conversation about them being behind schedule. right? So,
Sure.
but as I look at it on October 2nd, the Northern Illinois loss sucked, but they're still on pace for a playoff berth. They're still a team with 2 top 25 wins, right? So that we got to let the season play out a little bit, because whatever side you take on this is going to be impacted by how they finish. I think even the most critical person of Notre Dame, if they run the table, can look back and say, that was a bad day, and they got it fixed. Emotional letdown after A&M, and they got it fixed because they went out and ran the table. But at the same time, even the most diehard supporter of Brian Kelly should be able to look at the end of this, or excuse me, Marcus Freeman should be able to look at a 9-3 finish and say, yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. You've underachieved. I think that's fair. So as
100%.
of right today, I'm selling it. Let's see how the season plays out. And it could swing one way or the other. But as of today, I'm selling that hard. But, you know, the data on the ground should always give us that feeling. And right now, I think it's, again, somebody just said in the chat, the guy is, let's see, 26. He's 31 games in his Notre Dame career, and he has 9 wins over ranked opponents. Like, that's progress, but he also has some really bad losses.
Sure.
Right. So those two things balance out. So overall, I think it's trending in the right direction. I said this to somebody, that the question, Trevor, is not, is Marcus Freeman a good football coach? He's clearly a good football coach. The question is, and this is a very fair question, is he good enough to lead Notre Dame to a championship? So far, he has not shown that he is that either. But this discussion of, is he going to make it to 5 years? Is he going to be 5? That's nonsense, because he's clearly a good football coach. Is he good enough?
Sure.
That's the discussion. And that was always the discussion for me with Brian Kelly. I never said Brian Kelly's a bad football coach. I said Brian Kelly underachieved. I think he did some things badly. He missed some opportunities. But it was never about, is he a bad coach? I never said I had friends who were like, I have a buddy of mine that literally bet, I think like $1,000 or more on Brian Kelly getting fired in 3 years. And I want to be like, that's nuts. Like I just don't see that now, because he's not a bad coach. Even though I thought he was a bad fit, I said, like everybody at LSU got mad. I never said Brian Kelly's going to fail at LSU. I said Brian Kelly's not going to win a championship at LSU. And they lost their effing minds. You know what I mean? And I'm like, because he won't, because he's not that, but he's not terrible either. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, is like somebody just said in the chat, so M. Koshrub's on fire today because Marcus Freeman is not Butch Jones. I mean, exactly right. Exactly right. He's not Butch Jones, but we don't know that he's Dabo or Kirby or those other guys either.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's somewhere in between right now. And then now we're going to find out the rest of the next couple of years, which way is he leaning? You know what I mean? And that's an answer that, even if you're a supporter of him like I am, the Northern Illinois loss has to give you a chance to say, pause, and let's see how the season plays out before you defend one way or go the other way. Let's see how they recover from this. And so far, the recovery's been good, but there's a lot of football left.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that, Brian, because Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman now, once you get granular, there's mistakes that they have to clean up, obviously.
100%.
And based on some of the language that has been used on the sideline, Marcus Freeman knows that there's a lot of issues that need cleaned up by how undisciplined he knows that his team is, right? But Notre Dame has done what we as a fan base has essentially asked of them post Northern Illinois. You go out and you beat Purdue on the road by 59 points. You beat Miami of Ohio at home by 25 points. Now, mind you, it was 28-3, and that game had the potential to be a, Tennessee State-esque type of win, things that you have to get cleaned up. And then they followed it up with beating a top 15 opponent in Louisville. So I'm going to sell that just because there's a lot of the season left. But again, we'll see how they respond out of the bye week. More specifically, like I said, a couple shows ago, it's going to see what it's going to look like in week 2 post the bye, not just immediately after the bye week. But no, I don't think that they're behind schedule in year 3. So
yeah, agree.
BK last brain cell with another one. I buy, sell, hold. Joe Rudolph is a lot closer to a Quinn legacy than the gold standard Notre Dame is used to an offensive line.
I mean, right now you have to buy that.
Yep.
I mean, look, I understand there's injuries, but you're replacing those injured players with guys that you thought last year should have started over those guys that you're replaced. And the only reason those guys are starting is because those other guys one of those guys got hurt. So Yeah, you're in year 3. Or no, you're in year 2 no, hold on. No, he's year 2. Yeah, because Harry was Marcus, Coach Freeman's first offensive line coach. You're in year 2, and I would argue that your line has regressed. Now, there's extenuating circumstances to that, right? You've had injuries and all that, and that's very, very fair. But so far, I mean, there's a lot about this line that I don't like of how they're coached. Part of it could be youth, part of it could be injuries. But the one thing I'll say this, even though I say he's closer to Quinn than Harry Heastan, there's one big difference between what I've seen so far from his offensive line and what I saw from Jeff Quinn's offensive lines. Is outside of the 2020 line, which anyone that follows this channel knows that had a lot to do with the fact that Harry Heastan spent the whole offseason working with those veterans. This is partly why that 2020 team was so much better. The GA on that offensive line was a former Harry Heastan player who would meet with Coach Heastan and, was being mentored by Coach Heastan. So that had a Harry Heastan influence on it. But you have to be able to look at that and say look, in your last 2 years, Marcus Freeman says we're a line-driven team. And in 23 and 24, your offensive line has been one of your issues on offense. Whatever the excuses or reasons why, it's been disappointing. And that's a concern. That's a major concern. There's plenty of time for him to get this thing turned around, but so far, it's hard for me to argue against that. It really is. And I'm trying to look at this one with a critical mind of my view, because I was not a supporter of Joe Rudolph being hired, and I want to make sure that when I'm critical of him, that it's not built around, see, I told you so, because that's not good analysis. That's emotional fan talk right there. I'm trying to be as open-minded about this as I can be. And so that's why I'm giving caveats about the injuries and all this, and they're young and all that. But the reality is the offensive line has never looked very well coached in the first 2 years. They've looked talented at spots, but they've never looked overly well coached. And when you put veterans in the game who have double-digit career starts, and the not looking technically sound still is a problem, that's a concern for me. I mean, the right side of the line had a lot of issues in pass pro on Saturday with scheme. That's a junior, a senior, and a senior. Those aren't young guys. So I got to buy that, Trevor.
I'm with you. Not much more to add. I'm buying that as well. The way that I gauge it is if I'm looking at a meter, based on how the buy, sell, hold is worded, Joe Rudolph is closer to that Quinn legacy than the Harry Heastan legacy. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Rudolph is, Quinn 2.0, but it's definitely nowhere near close to the gold standard that Harry Heastan laid. Yep. I'm with you. Another buy, sell, hold from BK last brain cell. Leonard's best year at Duke was an outlier, and this year as well as last year's shortened season are more on par with what he is as a quarterback.
I disagree completely. If Riley Leonard was playing like he did just last year at Duke before the injury, Notre Dame's 5-0 right now, and they have not played a competitive football game. They would be 5-0 and would not have played a close game if he was the quarterback he was last season before he got injured. So, no, I sell that. Absolutely sell that. And an entire season is not an outlier. Like, you don't play a certain way for an entire season, and you're not really that guy. Reasons can result in you not being that guy again, but it's not like it was a fluke. He didn't flukily make the throws he made that season. So, no, I sell that. I sell that. Hardly. What did you say? You're hard buying it?
Yeah.
I'm hard selling that.
Yeah, that one I have nothing to add. I don't want to get started on down that road again because I know we have more buy sell holds to get to. It's just not fair to look at a kid's best season and say, well, that's the outlier. I just think that's an easy out. I really do. Riley Leonard, if you go and you watch him on film, he has the talent. Last year look, if the Riley Leonard who played Notre Dame in 2023 was the Riley Leonard that played against Northern Illinois, to Brian's point, Notre Dame is not losing that game, and they're winning well into double digits. I am a firm believer in that. So, no. So, buy, sell, hold. Rhesus Christ. At least 2 O-line position changes will happen.
I'm hope buying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, because
Hope
one
by.
of them is going to be Billy Schrouth coming back into the starting lineup, right? That's going to be one.
Mm-hmm.
Where, I don't know. Is it right guard? Is it left guard? I don't know. And then I do think that they need to make at least one more change based on our conversation yesterday.
Buy, sell, hold. A receiver will get 500 yards from now to 12 plus 1.
So basically, first round of the playoff.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah. So 500. So that's what, 8 games?
Yeah. Leading receiver right now is Bo Collins with 181 receiving yards, I think.
Yeah, I'll buy that. Again, I'm going to hope buy that because I think there's a couple teams that they're going to play coming up here who have not very good pass defenses. But I'm going to have some stats that I'm going to talk about too about who they play when I look at the schedule, Trevor. So, yeah. I love when people try to make negative comments about Riley Leonard and they completely ignore the running game. Like, if you're just putting Riley Leonard's stats into the conversation as a passer and you're not talking about running, then you are being disingenuous or you don't understand how quarterbacks that can run impact the football game. Guys, there's a reason that the Notre Dame defensive staff pushed for Notre Dame to go after Riley Leonard in the portal. That's a fact. Like, why? Come on. Some of you do better. You can debate that Riley Leonard's not the guy. That's fine. My issue is not that we can't have a debate about we can have a debate about Riley Leonard. But if you're going to purposely misuse stats or data or arguments, then you're not being genuine in your desire to have a conversation, and it's hard for me to take you seriously. It's very hard for me to take you seriously. If you watched that game against Notre Dame last year and didn't come away thinking that number 13 is the only reason it was even a close game, then you're not being then you don't understand what dual threat quarterbacks impact a game, and you're not being honest in your discussion of it. That you can have a conversation and say, hey, look, I don't think he's the guy. I don't think they should have got him. I think they needed to do this. That's a fair conversation to have. I think it's a fair conversation to say, hey, listen, at this point in time in the season, I don't think he's going to get a lot better. I think they can need to make a change of quarterback. That's a fair conversation to have. It is. But to try to have this revisionist history and try to skew stats and skew arguments to try to take a shot at the kid, when people get mad at me when I say this, but that's what I'm talking about when I say people make lazy arguments about Riley Leonard. And some people get in their feelings when I say that, but I'm sorry. People that want, like, we have this thing as fans that we can criticize players, but no one should come at us and criticize our opinions or our arguments. And that's not how we do it here. You can definitely make a case. And like Antavious is a guy that I've had a lot of disagreements with Riley Leonard. But for the most part, I think that he's trying to come at it from a place of, here's why I don't think it's the case, and here, let me make this argument, and it's a fair argument. And there's a place to have a fair argument. But some of this stuff is just, I know this isn't a good argument, but I'm going to say it anyway because it fits what I want. So I'm going to say this to fit what I want. And I just don't like having conversations like that. I just think if you're going to have this conversation, let's have a more honest and open conversation about it, because Riley Leonard, no matter how you felt about him before he came to Notre Dame, no matter how you felt about him before he came to Notre Dame, the reality is at Notre Dame, he has not been as good as he was at Duke. And you can have an honest conversation about whether or not in a Notre Dame uniform, he can be what Notre Dame needs at quarterback. That is an honest, open conversation to have. But we're not going to do this revisionist history stuff where we try to downplay what he did last year and act like Notre Dame beat Duke and Duke beat Clemson and almost beat Notre Dame in spite of Riley Leonard. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. And that's just not a genuine argument to have. And I'll make this case. You go back and watch Duke last year before he got hurt. He played behind a better offensive line last year at Duke than he has so far this year at Notre Dame. Facts. When it comes to pass pro, it's a fact. Actually, we got one more in this one.
Buy, sell, hold. We will continue to see more juice in the games to come.
I hope so. Honestly, Trevor. See, this is one I got to hold this one because this is my biggest criticism of Marcus Freeman. It's that we will see it and think, oh, they've turned the corner, and then Stanford 22 happens. They've turned the corner. They got over the Louisville game, man. They came out after losing to Louisville last year, and they beat the bejesus out of USC, and they destroyed Pitt, and then Clemson happens. and you're just like, I don't know what to make of this team. They come out and play great against Texas A&M. If they'd have played all 5 games this year the way they did against A&M, they're 5-0 and they're ranked in the top 5 probably. But they don't. And just because they've gotten better, and even if they come out and crush Stanford and Georgia Tech, it doesn't mean that they're going to not show up against Navy, because he has not proven that he can kind of have that. And I've pointed this out. I think Marcus Freeman's longest winning streak as a coach at Notre Dame, I believe, is what, 5 games?
Yeah, I
right?
think it's 5 games, and it took you from like a season to another season.
Correct. A bowl game from the season before. Exactly right. If you look at it in season, I think it's 4. They started last year off with 4. Then they lost 1, won 1, lost 1, won 2, lost 1, then won 3. Actually, no, and then because this year they won 4, including this year. The 5 is the South Carolina Bowl win, and then the first 4 games of last year.
Yep.
So in season, his longest win streak so far has been 4 games, and he's only done that once. And that was at the beginning of last year, where they played Navy, Tennessee State, Central Michigan, and then they had a really, really good road win at NC State. You got to give him credit for that. So it's that, yes, he's showing some good things, but we don't yet know if he can get them to do that every week. And that's why I say if we get to the end of the year, Notre Dame's 11-1, I have to think that some of that has been fixed. Because I don't know that you can go 11-1 and have another lay an egg game like you did against there's 4 or 5 teams on your schedule that will beat you if you come with the emotional energy you had against Northern Illinois or Stanford or teams like, now, am I predicting they're going to lose 4 or 5? No, because they don't do that week after week after week. They have that one letdown game where something is just not right with that football team. Coach has got to show that he can get them past that. So I can't buy this one. I'd like to hope buy it, but if I'm being honest, I got to hold this one. Because we need to see if they come out and curb stomp Stanford, right? That doesn't tell me that they're going to have the same energy the next week against Georgia Tech. And if they even do it then, it doesn't tell me they're going to have the same energy when they play Navy. I need to see it. I'm going
to hold on this one as well, Brian, just because I think if there is a huge miss that you can allude to for Marcus Freeman in his 3 years, it's this, right? It is his ability to get his teams up consistently for games. That is going to be one of my bigger marks at the end of the season to see if he's truly taken that next step as a head coach. Because in year 4, we can't be having these same conversations around, we know he'll get them up for the ranked games. We'll see what happens with the MAC teams. We'll see what happens with the 3 and 4 teams. Because that is a conversation that we cannot be having well into 2025. So I am hopeful to see that turns around, but I can't buy it. I just can't, because he's given me no reason to believe that it will turn around. Now, he has 7 more guaranteed opportunities to change that narrative, because there are games where it will be harder to get up for. I have no question Notre Dame's going to be up for the USC game. I don't really have any questions that they're going to get up for the Georgia Tech game, just based on what Georgia Tech and how they started the year in Ireland against Florida State. But it's for the Virginia game. It's for the Army-Navy game, because that's just nationally looked over. Even though they are playing really well this year, people just look at it and say, it's a service school. You should win by double digits, and don't understand what goes into beating those teams. So we'll see what happens, but there are bad opportunities for Marcus Freeman to not get his team prepared and bring the juice. So it's going to be a big point of evaluation for a lot of people, including us here at Irish Breakdown at the end of the year for sure.
Yep.
Buy, sell, hold, Hayden 32. Denbrock's knowledge, experience, and opinion leads the charge for change on offensive play calling and a change of personnel to help accomplish that.
I don't know that it'll lead the charge for a change on offensive play calling. I don't think it's so much. I'm going to sell that. The first part, change of personnel to help accomplish that. I mean, I think there will be a push. There will be a deep conversation about whether they need to change personnel. I'm very confident about that. Very confident about that.
Sure.
But again, it doesn't. You may say, "Look, this has to get better," but you get down as a staff and you go over things and you start watching practice film and you're like, "Guys, I know that this isn't good enough, but I don't know that the next guy's any better." I don't know that the next guy gives us any chance. Like if you're looking at Anthony Knapp, you say, well, look, there's a good chance Anthony Knapp's got a lot more room for improvement than Tosh Baker's going to have. And so if you think Anthony Knapp's better today than Tosh Baker, then it's hard for me to justify making that move because you, at least with Anthony as a true freshman, there's a chance he can improve and get better, And so just because they may feel the need that this isn't good enough doesn't mean that the personnel change can happen if the staff, right or wrong, whether we agree with it or not, doesn't view that the next option is any better. Sometimes it's like, look, we're not good enough here. We're not going to be good enough here. So I got to do things as a play caller to protect ourselves against not being good enough there. Sometimes that's the case. You know what I mean? And that's why I say, I don't know that I think changes will happen, but I think that they'll at least have a very thorough conversation about it.
I'm with you. I don't have a whole lot of differing opinions here. The one thing that I will add is, look, I know there's a lot of flack on Marcus Freeman for being a defensive-minded play caller, and his ideologies to how he approaches the offense, I do believe is an issue. But he's not calling plays. I don't think it's a situation where Mike Denbrock has a play in mind and Marcus Freeman says, no, we are not running that play. I really don't. If it is, then obviously that's an issue that needs addressed. Yeah. But I don't think that it is. I do believe that Mike Denbrock is tailoring his play calling to some of how Marcus Freeman wants his offense to look, but I don't think it is as granular as Mike Denbrock has a play in mind, and then he has to ask Marcus Freeman if that's okay to run, and then Marcus Freeman says, no, I don't.
There are always times when that's true, right, Trevor? Like there's always times when it's a fourth down, and you're going to make sure that the head coach is okay with what you guys have practiced. But he'll be part of that. Like, hey, coach, can we run this play? Because a good head coach will know what your fourth down plan was. But to your point, Trevor, it's not like, hey, coach, what do you want me to call here?
Right.
That's the difference. That's the difference.
Hayden 32 with another buy-sell hold. The bye week will help Howard Cross and Riley Mills self-reflect on how poor their play has been and kick them into another gear going forward. I
hope so. I'm going to hope buy this one, Trevor. I mean, that's all I can say is I have no clue if they will or won't. No clue. I'm just going to hope buy it. I'm going to hope buy it. If they play the way they did last year, the rest of the way, this Notre Dame defensive line is going to be just fine. Just fine.
I'll hope by that as well, just because I think they both have it in them. I kind of look at it the same as I look at the previous buy-sell hold of Notre Dame is going to come out after the bye week and consistently bring the juice for every game. I would love to, just got to see it.
Yep.
Charlie P, 123, buy-sell hold. Notre Dame's passing attack will continue to improve, and there will be at least 3 instances of receivers, be it wide receiver, tight end, or running backs, with over 100 yards receiving in a game.
I'll buy that. I mean, we were kind of having a similar conversation at this time last year, right? I think the first 100-yard game wasn't until game 6 against Duke, and that was from Mitchell Evans.
Yep.
And then we didn't see another 100-yard game, I think, until, was it Wake? The end of the year, or was it Pitt? I'm trying to remember. I think it was Wake Forest is the next one. No, because when Rico have one against Pitt last year? Hold on a second, because I think the next Rico Flores had the next one, and I think it was against Pitt. But let me just go look. It might have been against Wake Forest. Let me go look at that one here real quick. Let's see here. Mitchell Evans had the first one against Duke, and then Rico. No, it was not against Pitt, so that would have then been against Wake Forest. Right?
Yeah, he had 100. Yeah, he had 8 catches for 102
and
yards.
Then Jordan Faison went and had another one in the bowl game. So they didn't have any through the first 5 games last year, and then they ended up having 3 by the end of the year. So I'll buy that.
Yeah,
I'll buy that.
Buy for sure. Buy, sell, hold. Riker Ferg. Florida State 2025 recruiting class will continue to fall apart.
Yeah, I'm holding on that one for right now. I would. It just depends on how. Like, if Florida State finishes well, let's say they get their head out of their you-know-whats and pull off a big upset this weekend over Clemson, or let's say they get right and they finish like 5-7 or something like that, right? I think you'll be able to sell it like, hey, we figured it out. You're going to come in and play right away. We're going to be more high school driven, and maybe they keep some of those guys. I would lean towards right now. I would lean towards buy, but I just need to see how they bounce back. Because sometimes a bad start can be so bad that if you get it turned around, it almost becomes like a great selling point. You know, like I think about the 2010 season for Notre Dame. They were 4-5 at one point in time that year, but they won their last 4 games, beat Miami in the bowl game, beat a ranked Utah team, and all of a sudden Notre Dame was so hot at the end of the year, perception-wise, that they had top 150 recruits calling them, seeing if they had room left over. I was told that by 2 Notre Dame coaches. Like, yeah, I had to turn this one kid down because we don't have room for him. But like, this kid wouldn't give us the time of day in September, you know. But they were perceived as like, you know, they were hot and they beat Miami and you know, they finished 8-5.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so. It just depends on how they – but if they drop a couple more, then like if they lose to Duke next week in 2 weeks, that's going to be like, all right, they're done. And I think then the class falls apart. But I could see it, Riker. I'm going to hold for now. I want to see if they can at all bounce back. Because like, let's be honest, an upset win over Clemson, however unlikely, is something that could kind of get people to just, okay, take a breath. You know, let's see. I know a lot of their players are looking around right now, a lot of them, but they're not jumping ship yet. Let's see how the next if Clemson destroys them this weekend, then I think that could actually be the thing that starts it. And then if they lose to Duke, it's like, okay, the floodgates will open. Sure. No question.
Another buy sell hold from Riker Ferg. The Big Ten and SEC partnership will continue the 2 conferences gaining more power over the rest of the conferences in 1A football.
Sadly, I buy that.
Yeah,
because I think there's no leadership in college football right now, and as we have seen in human history, when there's a leadership void, what steps into the void is usually not good. And that's been true in almost every aspect that I can think of in human history, whether you're talking politics, talking about, you know, kings and emperors or sports. When there's a leadership void, a lot of times things like that, the thing that steps in is just not something you want. Mm-hmm. It's not. So without getting into too much of a historical or political argument, I think that holds true here because this isn't about sports. This is about power, about financial power. And that it fits right in line with where the most evil aspects come into play. Because this isn't about what's best for these players. It's not about what's best for the game. It's about we want to make the most amount of money. That's all that's driving that conversation. And I don't know that there's enough leadership in the NCAA or the ESPN level or whatever, College Football Playoff Committee, whatever the task force is that does all that. I don't know there's enough leadership to hold them off for good. Now, part of this is just really strong posturing by the Big Ten and ACC. They're going to demand 4, knowing that they'll settle for 3. And I don't know that there's the stones amongst the Big 12 and ACC and Pac-12 and whoever else is involved in this to say, no, you get 1. You get 1 guaranteed, just like everybody else. If your teams are good enough, they'll make it. You know, because I would even say, look, okay, fine, we'll give you 3 guaranteed, but you can't have more than 3. I'd play hardball with them. Fine, you want 4, we'll give you 4, but you can't have more than that. Or, you know, we'll give you 3, but you can't have more than 3. That's your limit. You get 3 every year. After that, you get no more. Like, you know, be smart, but I just don't feel that there's enough people that are making those kind of decisions that know what the heck they're doing or have the stones to stand strong and fight those 2 Goliaths. So, sadly, I'm going to buy that. I hope the heck I'm wrong on that. I really do. Because once that happens, you're going to see a lot of things start getting even worse, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Buy, sell, hold from bracketed cover 3. Mike Denbrock is one of the best offensive coordinators in the country, but his play calling is limited due to a variety of factors that may include offensive line issues, Coach Marcus Freeman, and or Riley Leonard being hurt.
Buy. I mean, yeah, buy. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
I think the Riley Leonard being hurt thing is more of a couple individual instances in games. I don't think Riley Leonard being hurt is why we saw what we saw against Louisville necessarily early on or afterwards. I mean, more about protecting him, not so much that he couldn't do certain things, but just, I don't know. I don't know that for a fact. I do think the only game that I think that was the case against Louisville, but I'm not as confident as saying that was definitely the case against Northern Illinois. But yeah, I mean, I think it's all those things. And it's been different things at different times. That's where I'm coming from on it.
I'll buy it as well. When you go back and you look at Mike Denbrock's previous track record at the other places that he had been, including Notre Dame back in the day, I don't think it's a lapse of him forgetting how to be a really good offensive coordinator, which I know is not what you're saying with this buy, sell, hold submission. So, yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think, and I'm glad that you phrased it this way, because we've been saying it a lot. There is not just one issue as to why Notre Dame's offense has been sputtering. It's not just Riley Leonard, and it's not just Mike Denbrock, and it's not just Marcus Freeman. It's a lot of issues. So this is a really good submission. I'm glad that you worded it the way that you did. But I agree with you 100%. Mike Denbrock is one of the best offensive coordinators in the country because he has shown it on paper, on the field, the product that he's putting out on the field. I agree. Another buy-sell hold from bracketed cover 3. Coach Marcus Freeman and his team come off of the bye week fired up and focused against a decent Stanford team. I would buy that. History says, especially with Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman coming out of the bye week, they do get that win coming off of the bye. It's the week following, which I'm not going to dive into it too much now, but I want to believe that they're going to come out fired up. For me, it's just that level of consistency of if they're going to do it the week after. But for that, I would buy that.
I do think Stanford is still a team that there's still enough guys that played in that game 2 years ago that still be like, hey, guys. And if you're Marcus Freeman, hey, guys, remember the last time we played them on this field? Remember what happened?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Got a little payback coming.
100%.
I know some people don't believe in that, but I flat out do. I absolutely think that's a part of college football that is that mind game is absolutely important. Absolutely important. And the fact that Stanford's 3-1 right now is great for Notre Dame. Great for Notre Dame. Who do they play this weekend? Let me go look and see what there's who does Stanford play this weekend? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure.
Oh, they're 2-2 actually. I'm sorry.
Yep.
They play Virginia Tech at home.
Mm-hmm.
I usually like to root for Virginia Tech, but I'm rooting hard for Stanford to win this game this weekend and be 3-2 and have a win over Virginia Tech and Syracuse. And that would be huge for Notre Dame. So I don't know that they will, but I'm hoping that they do, because you don't want them overlooking this football team again.
Sure.
Because I'll say this, like, Notre Dame should destroy Stanford. They should. But this is a much better Stanford team than the one that beat Notre Dame 2 years ago. Now, this is also a better Notre Dame team, but this is definitely a better Stanford team as well.
Yep. I will say my only fear is I'm hoping that Marcus Freeman didn't use that ammunition last year when Notre Dame played Stanford, because this is what that team did to you last year. I hope, Brian, it's more to your point of this is what they did to you on your home turf last time, and you have a chance to correct that mistake from 2022. But I really do firmly believe that Notre Dame is going to come out firing on all cylinders against Stanford. I mean, even if it's just for the sake of the team has had a chance to get healthy and rest. They've battled for 5 straight weeks, and especially after a hard-fought win over Louisville. So buy, sell, hold from D-Troll Hunter. Won't spend too much time on the first one because I think we talked about it before.
I bought that. Did you say you also buy that? Okay, so yeah, we're good there.
Another buy, sell, hold from D-Troll Hunter. Marcel Reed is a better fit as the quarterback in Klein's offense than Wigman, and Elko should stick with him.
Well, I have 2 thoughts about that. Number one is I do buy that Marcel Reed is a better fit in Colin Klein's offense. I do buy that. I don't buy the fact that they should stick with Marcel Reed if Connor Wegman is healthy and has the right attitude. I don't know that either of those things are true. But if let's just say Connor Wegman is healthy and Connor Wegman is got a good attitude and he's putting in the work and those type of things, just assuming that's true, then my thing is he's still your best quarterback on your team, and you should tailor your offense more to fit him than trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Now, that's going with no context of the circumstances around Wegman's health or attitude or anything along those lines. That makes sense. I'm just going strictly from a talent standpoint and experience standpoint, all those other type of things, right? So just so we're clear on what I'm referring to there. So that would be my takeaway, because as we've seen from the offense with Marcel Reed last week is, they went out and got a win, but it's not like he lit the world on fire.
Sure.
Last week. I mean, he went 11 of 22 for 163 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 13 rushing yards and a touchdown. So yeah, three touchdowns, 176 yards. The offense as a whole had barely over 300 yards, and you scored 21 points. So it's not like you won that game because your defense forced 3 turnovers. Like, that's why you won that game. You won that game because you literally had 3 big. One of your touchdown drives, Trevor, that you had as an offense last week was 10 yards. You had a 2-play 10-yard drive because you were down 14-7 and your defense forced a turnover. So I don't know that Marcel Reed has played in a way, because I think that the coach at SMU made a mistake benching Preston Stone the way that he did. But the kid that they put in there is at least making a lot of plays and putting up good numbers and leading to a lot of points. I don't know that I believe that to be true about Marcel Reed, and I think him doing that against Bowling Green doesn't mean that, okay, he can do it against SEC teams. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I don't know where Connor Wegman is at health-wise or attitude-wise. And the longer he's out, the more, I'll say this. I gave you my big picture view. I'll say this. If Marcel Reed starts this weekend and they beat Missouri, it now becomes very hard to make a change at quarterback, Trevor.
Yeah.
Very hard. Because now it's like, okay, we won 3 games without you, and we beat a ranked opponent, and, we're rolling. Now it becomes a whole lot harder for him to make that decision. Whole lot harder.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have much more to add. I'm with you. A win. If Marcel Reed is able to lead Texas A&M to a victory over Missouri, that conversation starts to get real interesting.
Yes, it does.
I'm with you.
Yes, it does. As long as he plays well. It's not like they win 13-10 and it's just the defense is lighting the world on fire. It's about totally. He goes out there, you score 27, 30 points. He does some nice things, and he played a role in your winning. Not that you win in spite of him. You right. So I want to make sure I'm clear with that caveat there.
Yep, I agree. Buy, sell, hold. Michigan State could play well enough defense against Oregon to keep it close this week.
Yeah, I buy that. I mean, I think that, you look at what they did against Ohio State last week. Again, I thought they battled early. And I'll be honest, I've not been at all impressed by Oregon so far this year. At all. Their offense has not impressed me at all. Now, they could have the wake-up game this weekend against Michigan State, Trevor, and it is out in Eugene, and that's going to be a tough environment for Michigan State. That's a little bit of a different animal than what they've kind of experienced so far. Just because, obviously this past weekend they played Ohio State, but that was a home game. They played at BC. That's a very calm environment. They played at Maryland, which is a relatively mild climate. Playing at Oregon is going to be a little different animal than it was last week. It is. And now this is going to be 3 tough games in a row, physically tough games in a row, because you had BC, right, Ohio State, now Oregon at Oregon. So it's going to be tough. But the question is, their submission is could play good enough. Well, that's a definitely buy. It could. Will they? That's a different conversation.
Yep, I agree. Buy, sell, hold. ABEN ND. Notre Dame will sign a quarterback in December.
Yes. Buy.
Yep. Buy.
I don't think it's going to be the guy that's currently, quote unquote, committed to them. I don't think it'll be him, but I do believe that they will sign a quarterback.
Yep. Buy, sell, hold. Salty Virginia Peanuts. At the end of the bye week, the offensive line will have the same players. Their pass pro effectiveness will be increased. The great one will benefit with increased targets per game.
It always comes back. It always comes back to Jaden Greathouse. I'm going to hope buy this one, just because if it means that Jaden Greathouse starts playing a lot better and the pass pro gets better. Like, here's the thing, Trevor. I don't have a dog in the fight when I hate that expression. You know what? I never want to use it. I just hate that expression. I don't know why I use it. I don't have a preference as to who plays in the offensive line. I'm not like, I'm Team Gerby or and I dislike Anthony Knapp because I didn't have him ranked I don't give a rip about any of that. I want Notre Dame offensive line to be really good. And if they think the current 5 is that, and they just need to work with them and play more together and improve some things here and improve communication, and they think that as long as they're right, like, this is the thing. And having a conversation earlier with somebody and said, well, coaches can be challenged. I'm like, you're absolutely right. Coaches absolutely can be challenged. And not just by me. It's not like, well, I coach football, so I'm the only one allowed to challenge. No, this is a freaking fan site. Of course we can challenge coaches. Just make a good argument, right? We all have we're fans, right? We all have the right and the space to do that. Just make a good argument. So my thing is, as long as they're right, if they put the same 5 out there against Stanford, I'm going to be a little nervous going into that game. I'm not going to lie to you, Trevor. I will. But if they go out there and play well, all right, cool. You guys address the need you address the issues and you fixed them. And as I've always said, a fix doesn't always require a personnel change. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where I'm at on that one. So, yeah.
I will always err on the side of, and sometimes it is to a fault, which, to call back what we talked about earlier, I have my opinions on for whenever you and I sit down for our Brian Kelly dinner. But I am always willing to err on the side that a coach will always do things intentionally for good reasons. So I have to believe that if Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock and Joe Rudolph decide to trot out that same offensive line that was out there against Louisville, it's got to be for, one, they showed significant improvement, maybe not significant, but improvement over the bye week. And 2, there is a level of continuity breeds success for an offensive line unit, which is something that they haven't had yet due to injury. So you kind of have to think, if you're in the coaching staff, do you want to manufacture some of that incontinuity by changing up the lineup again? So I would buy that. I think at the end of the bye week, the offensive line will be the same players. I do. Because, again, one common thing that you and I have talked about a lot, Brian, is the answer isn't always, let's just put in a new guy and see what happens. Now,
I personally would. Just, I mean, if I'm being honest about what my preference would be, I would prefer that when they go out there and play on Saturday against Stanford, that either Gerby Lambert or Sullivan Absher is playing left tackle. That'd be my preference.
Okay.
But if they think Anthony Knapp's the best guy and then Anthony Knapp goes out there and plays that way, all right, good call, guys. Yeah. I just personally would like to see that. But what I'm trying to say, Trevor, is just because I would make a change doesn't necessarily mean that ends up being the best thing for them. Sure. And if you choose not to make a change for the right reasons, then, and it works out great. But my thing is, I get frustrated when coaches don't make a change because they don't want to admit maybe that they screwed up, or because they have a bias towards a player one way or the other. That's when I don't like it. And I'm not saying that that's the case here with Notre Dame. But what I am saying is if they don't make a change and the offensive line continues to play this way, then clearly there's something wrong with you as an offensive line coach, that you're not seeing it and you're not willing to make the necessary changes. But if they don't change personnel and the line starts getting better and better and better, then okay, that's some heck of a patience you showed there that I wouldn't have had, but it worked out.
Yeah.
And that's what I just want to make sure I'm clear. I actually do think a personnel change is needed, but I'm not going to sit there and bang on them just because they don't make that change if it works out. But if you don't make a change and it doesn't work out and the offensive line doesn't get better, then the next conversation about a change that needs to happen could end up being the person at the top of the room.
Sure.
And I don't say that lightly. That's my point.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Okay, there we go. Hold on a second. Here we go.
Buy, sell, hold, Ramcray 75. The uptick in injuries across football is not due to playing surface, but rather due to kids specializing in sports at younger ages than in the past and having more mileage on the muscles and joints than they otherwise would if the kids played a variety of sports growing up. The mileage is increased repetition on those muscles and joints, as opposed to having to use those muscles and joints differently depending on the sports they played.
I am not qualified to speak on that at all. I have heard this argument before, and it's convincing to me to the point to where if I was ever fortunate enough to have kids, I would absolutely make them just for the physical benefits alone. I would have them playing multiple sports at different times of the year. But I also think there's social things that are beneficial to playing different sports. There's social growth for young people that go into being part of different teams and different sports. But I am not qualified to respond to this question. The specifics of, I mean, this is a great submission, like a great, but this is just not something that's in my area of expertise. And I haven't really studied up on it to the degree that you're talking about it here. So I wish I could speak on it intelligently, but I can't. Other than saying my gut is that there's a little something to this, even if it's not to the full degree. That's my thing. But overall, I'm not. It's like the same thing with the injuries. I don't know that the injuries are related to the sports strength and conditioning program, but you'd be foolish not to at least consider it and look into it. Same thing here. I'm not knowledgeable enough about this particular topic to say definitively buy, sell, or hold. But I also think it makes enough sense that you need to look into it and see if that's the case. And it could also still be that plus the playing surfaces. Just because one's true doesn't mean that the other one's also not true. That sometimes it's two things are coming together to create this issue. And that could also be true. But again, I'm not knowledgeable enough about this specific topic to be able to say anything. Because even a hold, I'm not comfortable saying a hold, because a hold makes it seem like I have an opinion, but I want to see how it plays out. I don't know. I'm selling my ability to comment on it intelligently. How about that, Trevor?
Nice. That was good.
Selling my ability to comment on it, to where I don't like. Yeah.
I'll have Lauren throw in her 2 cents on the board. She's an occupational therapist, so she might actually have some 2
I'd be
cents
curious to hear her thoughts on that.
To add in.
Yeah,
that is interesting. So
I've seen a lot of studies, Trevor, that show that young people should absolutely play different sports year round. They should not play one sport year round because their muscles are like, there is something to, their muscles are still developing, and different sports develop your body differently, and that there's benefits to that. It's just, that's I've read it, but yeah.
I also read an article the other day, and again, this is not me trying to say that I have expertise in this field, because I 100% do not. But there have been a lot of medical studies that have been done for like athletic training, and specifically around rest and recovery. And the name of the game right now is how quickly somebody can get back and how quickly somebody can go back to being healthy. And there's a lot of it that these now new age methods to athletic training and physical therapy and things like that are not as effective, because it's not because they're bypassing certain things, but it's rushed. Like, the human body is the human body, and anatomically, like, your body just needs time to recover, no matter if it's this new age way of like physical therapy or new age way of athletic training. So it was an interesting article. I'll have to go back and see if I can find it. And if I can, I'll post it on the board. But I'll see if I can get Lauren's 2 cents on it and ask her. So she knows a lot more about that than me. That's for sure.
Well, Trevor, that is it for today's show, man. Do you want to do your first outro? Do you want to take us out of here for the first time?
Oh boy. Yeah, I'll give it a try. I've heard it a few times. So, that'll do it for today's Buy, Sell, Hold edition of Irish Breakdown. kind of take it from where you left off.
Well played, my man. Well played.
Thank you. But appreciate everybody staying in here with us for the last 3 hours and some change. Before you guys head out of here, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and hit that notification bell so you guys will know when we're going live. Also, it's scrolling on the bottom of the screen down there, but go to boards@irishbreakdown.com. Subscribe to the premium message board. There you're going to find content that you're not going to find anywhere else. A lot of good forum posts on there, and give us a check out. But for Trevor Trowbridge, from my man Brian Driscoll, that'll do it for the Irish Breakdown podcast today, guys.